Okay, moving on to new business. SF SPCA feral cat program changes. Recently, the SF SPCA and SF Animal Control, Care and Control, I'm sorry. Pardon that. Animal Care and Control, in partnership, modified a long-standing feral cat program. Whereas in the past, mother cats and kittens less than 2 months old were captured from the wild, brought to the shelter, then returned to the wild, the mother cat, or adopted, the kittens. The new policy is to allow mothers and kittens to stay in the wild until the kittens are weaned. The speakers tonight are Dr. Cynthia Karsten, who is a veterinarian, outreach veterinarian at UC Davis, Dr. Jenna Valdez, who is the veterinarian and director of community medicine at the San Francisco SPCA, and Dr. Sherry O'Neill, who is the chief shelter veterinarian at Animal Care and Control. Maria Conlon of Give Me Shelter will also speak on behalf of the cat volunteers. And just quickly to clarify how this ended up on the agenda, this was brought to the Commission's attention 2 months ago, probably 2 months ago, and some people within the cat community brought it to our attention, but were unable or weren't able to add it to the agenda, did not want to add it to the agenda. Is that correct, Jane? Jane was communicating.
Right.
So
the first option was May, and it was too soon for ACC and the SPCA, so we had a public comment last May, and tonight's discussion.
Right. That's the unfortunate part of being a monthly meeting, is sometimes things get delayed. But it did make it to the agenda at this point. So Commissioner Tobin is going to lead the discussion.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody, for attending tonight. And we definitely want to understand the policy that was and the policy that is now, and find out a little bit more from the SPCA and ACC why the policy did in fact change, and from UC Davis as well. And from those of you who are on the ground working with the feral cat community, we want to also hear from you as well too. We did last month, but we'd like to hear a little more from you as well too. There are quite a few of you here tonight.
I can't hear you back here at all.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll speak a little louder. So we're going to kick the discussion off tonight first with Maria Conlon, the co-director of Give Me Shelter, who will speak on behalf of the cat volunteers.
Hi, welcome, Cat Lovers.
Whatever side of the church we sit on, we are all our cat lovers here. So, well, maybe, I don't know. Hopefully, you guys are. Anyways, I'm Maria Conlon. I'm actually, I volunteer, and I'm a co-director of Give Me Shelter, and an unpaid volunteer role. It's practically a full-time job. I am here speaking on behalf of the cats of San Francisco and the vulnerable.
Maria, could you speak into the mic, please?
Oh, the mic?
We're
Okay,
being
yeah.
recorded.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
So I'm here to speak on behalf of, as I. Okay. Am I better? Is that better? Maybe this one. Test. Is that better? Okay. Awesome. So anyways, I am a volunteer for Give Me Shelter, co-director. I do a lot of functions for them, adoptions, fostering, social media, website, you name it, I do it, except for veterinary care, I don't do that. But I'm here speaking on behalf of, not as representative necessarily of Give Me Shelter, but on behalf of the volunteers for the cat community in San Francisco, and the people that are the trappers and the fosters and that. So I just want to make that clear. I also invited Jen Clark, who has a wealth of knowledge with fostering feral moms. So I just let her introduce herself, and then she's going to share the presentation. Which can we put it up on the screen?
Yes.
How do we do that?
I will do that.
So I will let her. Good. Okay. I will let her do an introduction, and she's going to start, and we're going to share the presentation. Okay?
Hi, my name is Jen Clark. I've been a volunteer at SFACC for 9 years, working with behavior cats within the shelter. I've fostered over 100 kittens, feral mothers, and hospice, i.e. foster hospice cats, during that time, and would like to talk to you about my experiences and how they relate to this change in policy. One thing that I want to point out is that all of the pictures in here are not included just because they're cute cats. That's a side bonus. But because these are actually examples of the feral moms and their kittens that we're discussing in our homes. These, the majority of these are my pictures, but also from other volunteers. So just to keep in mind as you see that going through.
Is that, do you want to see the screen or?
Yeah.
Oh,
We-
yeah, you're okay with copies, okay. Just wanting to.
We have screens.
Okay. Oh, you do? Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so for 20 years, trappers and fosters have cared for feral moms in San Francisco. What would happen previous to this change is that members of the public would report sightings of feral moms and kittens. Trappers or animal care, control officers, thank you. Animal control officers were sent out to catch moms and kittens. If the kittens were unweaned, so typically under 4 weeks of age, they would be brought in and would be fostered, often through Tony's Kitty Rescue, which is a private organization that works in partnership with SFACC, or recently in SPCA's Mamas on the Streets program. Kittens were adopted out. They typically were in foster for a couple more weeks without the mom post-weaning until they could get up to what at the time was the weight needed, which was 2 pounds, and the mom was fixed and returned to her home to live out her life as a feral cat. What were our results? And how did this actually happen? What did we do? Note that we are going to be talking primarily about Tony's Kitty Rescue and SFACC because that is what our experience is. It's also what we believe that you all have the most potential influence over, given that that is a government organization. So I'm not really going to address the SPCA's decision to shut down the nursery. I don't have the background to address that. But I can tell you that as a foster for these feral moms, yes, these are cats that typically do not want to interact with humans. We know that. So what we do when we bring them into our homes is to minimize our interactions. So I typically put them in a bathroom, in a very large dog kennel, very large, like Great Dane bigger, and have in there food, blankets, water, litter box, and go in about twice a day for a couple of minutes, switch out those things. What will typically happen when I go in is that the mom cat will retreat or will just stay where she is, and will certainly keep an eye on me, but there's no big reaction. I actually keep a camera on the mom so I can see how she's interacting with her kittens when I'm not there, and very shortly after I've left the room, she very much relaxes. She's nursing her kittens, she's grooming herself, she's grooming the kittens. The kittens that I've had have all lived, have all been fat, healthy kittens because they've been nursing from their mom, which is what's needed. And in addition to that, they've been safe within my home up until the point that they could live without mom and could live off solid food. The other thing to note, one of the things that has been said that's been said in regards to this decision is that no one is thinking about the moms. That's absolutely not the case. I'm not a kitten fosterer. I'm a cat and kitten fosterer. I would certainly not make a decision to bring a cat into my home and sort of torture them for 4 weeks just so we could get the kittens out, by using the mother. What instead I see is that the mother will often come in very thin. I often have mothers that come in 5.5 pounds, which if you know anything about the size of a cat, is pretty underweight. What they'll do though is they eat a tremendous amount because they are nursing these kittens and will typically gain weight by the time they're weighed when they're fixed and going out, and look a lot healthier. They will have been treated for worms, they will have been treated, they'll get their initial shots, etc. So not only were the kittens put up for adoption, but the moms were also healthier when they were put out. So in May, what we were told by SFACC and SFSPCA was that they would not enlist trappers for kittens under 4 weeks of age. I met with Dr. Emil and other employees of SFACC, and the primary reasons that I understood that they were saying this, in addition to understanding from the email that Virginia Donahue sent out, was perceived cruelty and trauma to the mom while in captivity, and it seemed that they were including both the SPCA shelter program and the foster homes in this. A mortality rate of 45% for kittens under 4 weeks of age at SFACC, which was cited as not a success, and also we'll address later why that's not a useful statistics in regards to making this policy decision. And also the belief that moms and kittens are equipped to survive outside and can be trapped post-weaning when the mother could be immediately returned as opposed to being in a foster home. So we're going to walk through those things and address why we think why we disagree with those reasons for making this policy decision. First of all, the claims of trauma to the moms do not reflect our experience and are not well supported. Again, we're talking here about the fostering aspect of this. I can't speak to anything that happened at the SPCA. A lot of the data that we were provided when we requested it from SFACC dealt with trap-neuter-return. And in the general sense, we all know that at a certain point, a feral cat gets to a point where they aren't going to be socializable. They shouldn't be in a home. Their best opportunity for life is to live outdoors. The problem is that no data compared the stress of raising kittens outdoors, not just being a single cat roaming around the place. So it didn't compare that stress of raising kittens to the theoretical increased stress in a foster home. And what we're saying is, yes, we absolutely understand that feral cats should be allowed to be feral and live out their lives. But in this 4-week period, one could logically assume that the mother, while hunting and nursing and trying to protect her babies in a city where she faces predators, etc., is under more stress. And I take issue with the idea that the limited few minutes of contact that also come along with unlimited food, water, shelter, a quiet place, is so much so that stress that the mother might experience in the outdoors is significantly less than any increased stress she might have by minimal contact with human beings. Fosters have seen firsthand that mothers relax in the home. As I mentioned previously, seeing them when I'm not in the room, seeing them on camera, they do the behaviors that any cat does. They're nursing. And we know that this happens because our mortality rate that we've observed, and I grant you that we have not documented this, but we've had 20 years worth of experience with myself and other fosters, and what we see is these kittens do very well. I haven't lost kittens, and the fosters that I've spoken to have lost minimal kittens in this situation. So if the mother is so extremely stressed, one would expect that she couldn't feed her kittens, that she couldn't be a good mom, that she was potentially even a danger to them, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing healthy kittens, and we're seeing moms who are gaining weight and are appearing healthier when they go to spay. And I'm going to turn it over to Monica.
Maria, I wanted to let you know that microphone by you now is working.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we wanted to talk about the statistic that was put out to the SF Chronicle as well as to communicated to volunteers about the rates of 45% that 45% kitten mortality rate for kittens under 4 weeks old, that they claimed that this was not a success. It was proof that the feral moms weren't well served coming through the ACC community, including Tony's Kitty Rescue. However, as I sat in Executive Director Virginia Donahue's office with the Director of Give Me Shelter, Lana Basil, we discussed this statistic with her, and we were told that kittens, there was no way to differentiate in this data whether a kitten came in with a mom or not. There was no way to differentiate if the kitten was euthanized at the shelter because it's my understanding that it's the ACC policy to euthanize kittens under about 8 days old if they come in with their eyes closed. So there's no way to differentiate that 45% data whether that kitten came in with a mom or not. In fact, as many kittens that come in young are under a week old, do without a mom, have a smaller chance of survival. So the statistic doesn't really, 45 for mortality rate, and then there was no comparison of what the statistic is. How many do we think live outside? I mean, is it 45%? Is there more are there more that die outside? So also the other thing I just want to call out about that is that there can be an issue with the accuracy of the age assessment of kittens for young kittens, particularly, for example, a kitten that we recently took from the shelter, they said was 5 to 6 months old, but the kitten was 3.5 pounds. And kittens typically gain weight a pound a month. So a 3.5 pound kitten would probably be about 3.5 months old. Typically how it works. Sometimes they get bigger, sometimes they're smaller, but typically that's how it works. So that kitten was assessed to be 5 to 6 months at ACC. The kitten that we took out was 3.5 months. So. And then, of course, kittens are extremely vulnerable. They're under 4 weeks old. I mean, really, they're all pretty vulnerable. But you have many perils outside that you don't have inside of a foster home. And this perils for the mom too, as she has to move her kittens because of predators. There's predators such as coyotes. I mean, I know I've seen coyotes running around on the city streets. There's raccoons, there's dogs, there's also the human predator, the people that don't like cats and might actually hurt them. They can die because the mom has to move the kitten from place to place in order to keep them safe. So then sometimes when they're moving the kitten, of course they can only move one kitten at a time. They might have to abandon one if a predator comes along, so then that kitten is left to die. They could die from starvation because, as Jen said, they're not getting adequate food. They're having to go out and hunt for their food. Unless they are so fortunate that somebody's actually feeding them. They also have, disease. There's multiple kittens that will come in, flea infestations, worms, upper respiratory, diarrhea, infected eyes, you name it. And then there's, just the elements of outside. It's rarely too hot in San Francisco, but we did have some 90-degree days, or when it's raining. And then a quote from a long-term trapper and foster mom is that, as you can see, is usually moms and kittens are not in the perfect place. They're in a parking lot, a construction zone, or a backyard with access to many other backyards. They're at risk from going hungry, catching diseases, or being killed by predators. Plus, the mom can move the kittens away at any time. So trappers, and in this time, because of our attention, of course, has been on it, I've heard of trappers finding dead kittens that have been attacked or killed by coyotes, kittens that have been run over by cars, or kittens that have died of starvation. And while I didn't put it in the presentation, I do have photos of those kittens. So, it's actually real. It's the reality of being outside as a vulnerable kitten. When you can have the option of being inside safely in a foster home that's calm, safe, where somebody's caring for you. Move on. I think I might have skipped rolling off for that one. Just for the audience, you can see the cute little kitten. That kitten's about 2 days old. So waiting to trap is a risky proposition. So it's along the lines of what I just said, but delving into it a little bit more. On the side is a text between a trapper and somebody that contacted that person because they found kittens in their backyard. They put out food in the morning. So fortunately, those kittens are actually getting fed, but then they saw them and they disappear. So we don't know what happens to those kittens. So the kittens will die, as I said, they will die due to disease, predators, or an unsafe environment. Then mom is moving the kittens and the trapper can't find them anymore. Then mom, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've certainly seen moms go into heat as soon as maybe 2 months while they're still nursing their kittens. So mom she can continuously have litters. So if you don't spay her, she can be pregnant again. And then those kittens disappear and begin to reproduce. Some studies say, as young as 5 to 6 months, they can start having kittens. So if you don't trap those kittens, and that's if they survive. So, and then only some of the litter is trapped, and then those kittens become. Everybody thinks they're you have these little kittens you can easily catch them because you see the super cute, fluffy, friendly ones in the shelter. But these little kittens are fast. and they can get away quickly from you. And once the benefit of trapping the kittens with the mom when they're really young like that is that you can put the kittens in the trap as bait, and then mom will come in to retrieve her kittens, and then boom, you got kittens and mom all at once. So if you don't, and you have these little kittens that are like 4 or 5 weeks old running around, scurrying around, then you might never catch those kittens, and you might need to leave one behind because you got mom, you got the other kittens, hopefully, and then the other kittens are scurrying around. They might be lost forever, and then maybe they can't survive on their own. So it's really great opportunity to be able to catch these kittens when they're really small like this and allow them to nurse in a foster home where they were in a safe, calm environment. Then there's the issue of kittens that are trapped later. If they are over 3 months old, the ACC and SPCA will no longer allow them to be socialized. And oftentimes, and I know this is where I started out, had the benefit of learning from fostering feral kittens through Tony's Kitty Rescue and Animal Care and Control, and when I was initially a volunteer there. And it's amazing to see these little kittens that are teeny, and sometimes as old as 3 months old, being able to, they'll act feral, they'll give you this little vicious hiss spit, it's hilarious, and then you pick them up and you burrito them in a little blanket, and you hold them close to your heart, and then they bond with you. And these kittens that would have possibly had to live on the streets of San Francisco, possibly not survive, have the opportunity to be in a home safe. Isn't that what we want to do for the cats of San Francisco? Then you end up, if you put these kittens outside back at 3 or 4 months old, then you're going to have more feral cats living around, more homeless cats and a larger feral cat population. So that's, our goal. I think San Francisco is unique in that it doesn't have feral cats like other areas do, which leads into my our next slide. It's a much more favorable position because San Francisco is ahead of the curve in helping the feral cat population. You have people that have legacy experience that I've learned from 20 plus years working on this, out trapping, out reducing the population of feral cats. And they are all my mentors, they're all who I've learned from, and I respect them greatly. They have been helping these cats and reducing the populations. All of these people do this on their own time. It's all volunteer. Many of them I know pay for veterinary care for the animals that they care, that they take in if the shelters are not able to help them. And so the decisions. So what I say is San Francisco. Rarely have I seen the shelter full or overflowing with cats, or you have 20 cat, daily 20 cats coming in or 40 cats coming in, in the Central Valley. I know this because the rescue that I volunteer for, Give Me Shelter, regularly takes cats from the Central Valley. And this is where they kill the friendly, adoptable, highly adoptable animals that we put up for adoption here in San Francisco for time and space, where disease might run rampant in that shelter because it's overpopulated with cats or dogs. And where a cat that's scared or feral is no chance of making it out of the shelter alive. Whereas in San Francisco, we're unique, and Give Me Shelter takes some of the hardest cats from Animal Care and Control in order to give them a chance. So, this is what makes San Francisco special. These programs that we have in place are extremely progressive, and we could be leading the way. We could be doing, we should be doing studies on what we do in San Francisco and the successes we have, not following other studies where those statistics you're comparing apples to oranges essentially. You're saying that overpopulated shelters like in the Central Valley compared to San Francisco, and they don't. They just simply do not. We have a great community of volunteers that work at all of these shelters that help support the animals, that help get adoptions, and rescue groups that work with them as well, as I know with the dogs as well. And San Francisco's live release rate for cats is 90% compared to a national average of 35%. I don't know what it is in the Central Valley, but I just know I have a lot of experience with taking cats from there. So we're so far ahead of the curve, and these decisions should be on animal welfare should be different from our own. So I just encourage you to help support us and get our message across to continue these progressive programs so we can really help the cats and the most vulnerable cats of San Francisco, the ones that are outside with their little teeny babies, squeaking around. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jen.
this said, we're not actually in complete disagreement here as to the idea that if a mom is getting fed, has shelter, and has a safe place to be, that she can be left outside to nurse her babies until they can be trapped. What we disagree about is the likelihood that that is the case. Now, what we understand through the trappers who have been working again 10, 20 years is that oftentimes these moms are found in difficult situations. And so when I met with Dr. O'Neill and Ariana from SFACC, I asked about the operational plan, and I asked today, again, in a meeting that we had with one of the vets who will be speaking here. And to be honest, I'm not getting clear, it's not clear to me, even from the people who are in the same organization, as to whether they consider that this policy has already been rolled out. There's some disagreement about that. What they do agree on is that the operational plan has not been put into place to validate whether or not these kittens are in a safe place. And what our point is that from the understanding that we have of what people who are calling into the SPCA and to ACC are being told, is that there's not a standard protocol that they're being worked on. And I can't speak to the SPCA, but there is a sense that the sense and the understanding of volunteers and the trappers is that the policy of not sending a trapper out to evaluate the situation has already been put into place. There's some disagreement on that, but there's disagreement among the people who are actually putting forward this policy, so I don't know what to tell you other than no one can say to me, we're sending trappers out just like we used to. And I would argue then if we're not doing what we used to, then the policy has been implemented and it has changed. And so what we're saying and what we're asking of you all from an influence perspective is to say to ACC that it's one thing to potentially implement this policy, but that has to go hand in hand with the operational process. And that can't be two separate things, because if you're not sending the trappers out, then the policy is in place. And if you haven't put in place the guidelines to your staff, or you aren't using the trappers in a different way to go out and see what the circumstances are and to make a call as to whether or not the mom and kittens, A, are safe, and B, are likely to be there in 4 weeks, that just doesn't work. There's also a lot of discrepancy about whether there will be follow-up. There was a lot of talk from Dr. O'Neill when I spoke with her about needing to rely on the public to follow up. Because again, these processes were not in place to say, someone's reported, kittens with closed eyes, and we're gonna check back at this address in X number of weeks to see if they've now gotten to an age where they're weaned. So again, there's not clarity on what are the processes going to be to ensure that these cats and kittens are safe. There's also no documentation. There's a lot of talk about sort of involving the public, but there's been no documentation so far to help the public understand what it is they're seeing. Someone that I work with in this has mentioned that oftentimes she'll hear from people that there are newborn kittens running around, which is funny because a newborn kitten can't run around. A newborn kitten has its eyes closed, is maybe wiggling a little bit. And so the public has no idea how old these kittens are, and nor should they, but they can't then just on the phone suddenly become an expert to figure out how old these kittens are. So our request, again, of you, and the request that we made to ACC and to SPCA, and that candidly we're here speaking to you because we didn't feel heard. I can tell you that I wrote a lengthy letter that took me a long time to the leadership of ACC, and what I received back was an identical, very short email response to what other volunteers who had written different emails wrote. It didn't address any of my concerns. So I don't feel heard. I don't feel that this was taken into account with anything other than looking at general statistics and general shelter medicine guidelines that again are based on a US live release rate of 35%. Of course you're not going to bring in moms and itty bitty kittens if you've got a 70% euthanasia rate, on kittens who are adoptable and healthy. Of course you wouldn't do that, but that's not what we have here. There's also a lot of talk about resources and how we need to save our resources for the ones that are most in need. But when I asked what was the problem that indicated that we didn't have enough resources to actually support these moms, particularly since Tony's Kitty Rescue has foster parents that will take these cats in, you know, there were some vague things about capacity of care, about illness in the shelter, but there was nothing that pointed to say, we actually don't have foster kittens, or we don't actually have foster parents who would take them. I'm not saying we have, you know, hundreds of foster parents who will take them, but I can tell you that my capacity as a foster parent to take feral moms has never been sort of tapped, hasn't even come close. So if that's not happening to me, for me, and if that's not happening for other foster parents, then where is the issue of capacity? And just one other thing on our request is, like, we want someone to go out and assess the situation. We think the trappers would be potentially open to doing that if trained, and then to follow it up and see what the outcomes are, and to do this in a responsible way. And that's what we feel like has not happened to date. And again, you know, we got out of a meeting again with one of the vets who will talk to you, and there was a lot of talk about how the shelter doesn't have unlimited resources, and that, you know, again, this capacity of care and length of stay. All of that is really useful. However, you've got to really look at the situation on the ground, and we can't be making decisions that are based on what happens at most shelters when we are an incredibly fortunate city and an incredibly fortunate shelter. And so what I expect, and what I think all of us volunteers work for, is the best outcome for a cat. Now, being put out as feral, if you are indeed a feral cat, is your best outcome. But if you are a cat that has the potential to be a pet, your lifespan is going to be twice the length. You're going to have a much healthier life, and that is the best outcome. So if there's no other choice, yes, living outdoors is great. But if there is, we want that other choice, and that's what we are working for and what we would like ACC to work for. And just in closing, thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing us this time. You know, help us to help them. I want to continue to be able to help these mothers, help these cats, help these kittens, and would like to work with these organizations, but unfortunately don't feel like that these organizations are working with the volunteers, whether they be trappers or fosters, to understand our perspective and to work that perspective into their decision-making skills. Thank you.
I just want to say
one
last thing. I just want to thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to speak here today and to have this on the agenda as an item. I implore you to please help us speak up for the cats of San Francisco, and I'm just very grateful for this, so thank you. Yes.
Okay, so right now, I'd definitely like the commissioners to weigh in with any questions that they might have from the discussion brought, and the presentation brought to us by Maria Conlon and Jen Clark. I have one. I'm going to backtrack, and I'm going to say the long goal of everything in this city is feral cat community total collapse, right? It's gone. That there aren't feral cats anymore. So the long game you're playing with your strategy on this is to put spayed females out there in the population, so that, and take the kittens out of it, so we eventually come to a place in which there are not feral cats in the community that need to be managed.
Yes. Right, exactly.
Okay, so it's a long game.
It's a long game. I mean, and people and the community has been at it, I mean, far longer than I've been involved. For 20,
right.
People have been doing this for, oh, sorry, I always forget. People have been doing this for 20 plus years, so that's why we're ahead of the curve. These people that are super experienced, that know how to go out and trap cats. If you've ever gone out to trap cats, and I'm certainly not the expert, it is a waiting game. You have to sit there and be super patient. So yeah, I mean, they are super dedicated.
Yeah. It's an all-day fishing expedition.
Yes, exactly, for kittens or cats.
Bring a good book.
Totally.
I definitely want to hear from the commissioners too. I'm sure you have some questions, and I believe when listening to ACC and the SPCA, we'll have a little bit more clarity on some of the programs that they did have in place and the policy shift itself too. You did a very good job of illuminating some of the reasons, or some of that. I'd like to hear some of the reasons too, from their perspective. So, just go ahead, commissioners, ask away.
How did you guys find out that the policy changed to begin with? Did you stop getting calls about feral cats? Were you notified?
At first it was via word of mouth, because I think a couple of people knew that there were discussions being had, but no formal announcement was actually made until May. And I don't remember the exact date that Lana, the director of Gimme Shelter, and I met with Virginia sometime in April, maybe. I'd have to look at my calendar to confirm the date. But at that point, she had said when we asked her about it that they had not made a final decision, that there was going to be some conversation next week. And then the next week, that's when I learned from the volunteers that an official communication had been sent out. So I think there were many discussions and it was all word of mouth until a final communication was made to the ACC volunteers.
And from my perspective, I have heard the word of mouth, but I think in any organization, some of the word of mouth can be distracting. So for me, I didn't really get involved in having discussions about it until Virginia Donahue sent out the email announcing the change. There were some office hours I met with Dr. O'Neill and Ariana during those office hours.
Just one point of clarification. This will probably come from ACC or the SPCA, but who calls you when there was trap-neuter release request?
Oh, the way that
how's that process work, and how is it divided amongst who takes the SPCA versus ACC?
Well, I can't speak to the SPCA, but I know that they have, what I know, and I could be wrong because I'm not the expert in that area, is that they have volunteer trappers that they would, they'll get a call and then they'll send the trappers out to go catch the cat or kittens or whatever it is. Yeah.
Is they ACC?
That's SPCA. They have volunteer trappers that go out and they can clarify that, to confirm that that's correct. But I'm pretty sure at ACC what they did is that people would call the front desk. They would have trappers, for example, Rocky, who was the one who initiated some of these conversations, who unfortunately is not here tonight, they would give the person who found the mom and kittens or cats his number, and then they would get in contact. He would go out, trap the kittens, and then bring them into ACC or SPCA. Yeah.
I will say that my understanding is that there are more trappers traditionally that have worked with SPCA. We have a very limited number, Rocky plus like one or two maybe, I'm not sure, for ACC. But part of the confusion of all of this is the intake can be through either organization. And I think also in addition to that, the animal control officers also at times, especially if the animal was believed to be in an unsafe situation, would also be sent out. So this is my understanding.
Again, that brings up another question about the SPCA and ACC's partnership on this too. Are there partnership statistics that reflect the intake of these kittens and the outcome of the kittens and moms right now? Combined.
Oh, I mean, all I know is that
separated.
They have on their websites, I think SPCA has on their website SPCA statistics, and they have SPCA and ACC statistics combined. I mean, that's just what I've witnessed on the website, but I'm certainly not the expert on that.
I'll ask more about their combined statistics on this as well too.
But as far as like the feral mom or kittens or that kind of stuff, I don't have knowledge of that information.
Just out of curiosity, sorry. Currently, what type of an organizational system does it work between Tony's, Give Me Shelter, and others that are in the volunteer aspect out there to determine at any given time how many foster homes are available, if cats are presented or cats are discovered out in the environment.
So Give Me Shelter doesn't actually foster. They will typically take, they
Well,
do
yeah.
foster.
Well,
but-
Give Me
yeah.
Shelter takes the at-risk cats from animal care and control, the ones that aren't put up for adoption. So we aren't really we don't take like the feral moms or the kittens. That's most, I'll let Jen speak to that. That's mostly Tony's Kitty Rescue. So we take the at-risk cats, and then, but then we also take sometimes the kittens that are, now we've been taking the kittens that are not made available or not given an opportunity to go into animal care and control or SPCA because they're older than 3 months or they're not as social as they would like them to be. So we've been taking some of those kittens, and we put them, we have foster homes. I manage the foster homes for our rescue. So, but we don't have, we're a smaller rescue and we mostly focus on adult and senior cats, but we also have under-socialized kittens. Does that answer your question?
But I can actually,
I'm gonna let her elaborate on Tony's
Go
Kitty
ahead,
Rescue.
Jen.
So on the Tony's Kitty Rescue front, so Tony's Kitty Rescue is a separate organization, but is somewhat embedded in ACC, so are physically in the volunteer room many hours of the opening of ACC. And what will happen is typically when cats and kittens come in, Tony will contact fosters and will place them. So what I think candidly we could probably do better about is I don't think that we could necessarily at any one point say this is exactly all of the open fosters. What I will say though in regards to the feral moms is that oftentimes for people who have separate spaces in their home, the feral mom is actually not much of an uplift. So for example, I could be fostering 2 kittens in my second bedroom who I'm having to actually interact with, and also foster a feral mom in this separate bathroom because all I'm having to do for her is to check in periodically, change the food, etc. So I think from a pure, like, how many foster homes are open right this second, we probably could do better from a tracking, but what typically happens is we just scramble until we find foster homes available. And I don't candidly know of many circumstances where we absolutely cannot come up with a solution to foster.
Yeah, it really is it's a community working together. I know that's how it works for Give Me Shelter too. It's like you send out a communication to your community and see who can help. We have these cats in need and see who comes up. And a lot of it, I know for Give Me Shelter, a lot of that is done via social media. It's like you reach out to your community. And I know Tony's Kitty Rescue has a social media presence, so people know they want to come to foster, they'll reach out to her.
And just so we're kind of aware of general numbers, not going to hold you to any statistics, but with your group and everybody else that's involved in the extended sort of rescuers and fosterers, what types of annual numbers do you think you've dealt with over the last couple of years?
Intake for kittens?
Fostering outside of ACC, outside of SPCA, community, basically doing the job of taking these mothers, the queens, the kittens, finding homes for them on their own, not being turned back over to any governmental or other institution. What's your capacity been like in recent years?
Specifically on queens and kittens?
Yeah, the ones that we're talking about today.
I don't know that we could follow up and look to see if we could to take mom. Okay. So it sounds like about 10 foster homes could take in. I know, you could ask ACC and SPCA about the ones that were going through SPCA because most of them were diverted to SPCA when the in-shelter program existed, but I believe it was around somewhere in like the 40 to 60 range, I believe, but they could confirm that, 40 to 60 per year. In terms of the number of, and I believe that was the number of moms, but again, they would probably have the most accurate on the volume of these things coming in. Just to clarify on what happens with these, So the mom typically goes through community cats and is turned out. So the mom goes to SPCA and is then returned to where she came from. The kittens actually do come to ACC and are put up for adoption through ACC. And I believe that Tony's Kitty Rescue, typically in a kitten season, it's been dropping the number of kittens that we handle, but since I've been here, I think our high has been over 1,000 per year, and recently around 700? 800 per year that we're fostering.
Is that decline in kitten population related to a better success rate in the decline of the feral cat population?
I don't know that I could speak to that, but I can speak to ACC's cat intake for the past 10 years has been cut in half. I would assume that that is related to the Trap-Neuter-Release programs that have been in place, but I couldn't speak authoritatively about that.
Can I interject for something? I live on Nob Hill, and someone dumped one kitten, just by the garbage can. And someone heard it and gave it to the store, and then they called me.
We'll have public comment when
Oh,
we're
I'm
done
sorry.
with the commissioner
I just want to
questions.
say.
Yeah, thank you.
okay.
Commissioner, did you have a question?
Yes, out of the 800 to 1,000 kittens, so do you know how many are adopted out of that number?
All of them that
all-
survive,
that's-
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, I guess we already had a chance to speak, but I mean, I would just say I started volunteering with Tony's Kitty Rescue, and I mean, she's just a wealth of knowledge, and she's helped so many kittens and cats in San Francisco, and it's, you know, it's been a great partnership, I think, with Animal Care and Control and Tony's Kitty Rescue.
I want to thank you guys for coming up to speak and sharing your presentation with us. And I'd also like to introduce, I'm trying to see if she's here right now. Is Dr. Cynthia Karsten here? Okay.
Oh, she's going to present next, right?
Yes, I wanted to introduce the next speaker so that you have a chance to kind of hear from them as well, too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Maria.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
Got it, thank you.
So I have a brief note here on Dr. Karsten. This is Cynthia Karsten. She is, let's see, where can I start on her quickly? Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself here too? What I do know is that she is now the outreach veterinarian with UC Davis's Correct Shelter Medicine Program.
Dr. Carson, I gave my notes to my colleague, but I know
Okay,
that you graduated from University of Wisconsin in 2010, and then you went on to do your, and then you went from veterinary school. Would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I did. So prior to vet school, I went into vet school knowing I wanted to work with animal shelters. So I had volunteered in animal shelters prior to vet school, and then went to vet school with that focus. Found out I could do an internship in shelter medicine, so I did. That was a conjunction program between University of Colorado and the Dumb Friends League in Denver. And then I've been in California since. I did my residency at UC Davis, and I've been able to stay on as the outreach veterinarian as part of the shelter medicine program. I know I'm not popular today.
We're glad you're here. Thank you
But
for
I'm here.
coming.
Thank you.
Did you have a presentation that you wanted to show?
I was
Okay.
just going to
Thank you.
introduce myself and be available for, I hope to provide some clarity. I know it's not being sought by all of this room, but I would like to provide it. So my role in all of this, and why I was asked to be here today by Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Valdez, was that part of our program is we have shelter medicine veterinarians who can work with us for the year. We mentor them through our fellowship program. They stay in their shelters, but they work with us. So as our program, we've been working with the San Francisco SPCA for years. I've been working personally with Dr. Roberts for 2 years on her fellowship project, and I've been working with Dr. O'Neill for the last year on her fellowship project. So both of them were focusing on capacity for care, and it would seem that that's become a very unfavorable term. But what I want to be clear about is we were talking about what they were doing in their shelters. Okay, so we looked at their data. How animals were coming into their shelter, how long they were staying, how they were exiting, how they felt about how things were going at their shelter. So the recommendations that have been given to them are based on San Francisco because it's what's happening within the shelter. That is what our focus was for their projects. They both had things they wanted to work on because they were not pleased with how things were going. And I am not, by any means, I will not stand before you and say that San Francisco is not amazing, because it is. And absolutely what is going on here is not happening in other places, and I commend everyone for their involvement. But that is also not to say that there are not limited resources here. We cannot save every single animal who needs our help. You are very close. But it also comes at a price. So when you have limited resources, everything you do has a cost and a benefit, and everything also has an opportunity cost. So when we run under the assumption, when we try to work in that we can help every single animal, we compromise somewhere. Either someone we're not helping, we're not able to help as well as we can, we compromise people. In my job, I'm an advocate for animals, but I'm also an advocate for the people who are working so hard to help them. So if someone comes to me and says, you know what, I am really struggling, our organization is really struggling because we are trying to help, but we're not able to do it at the level that we would like, we're not able to do it for the number we can help. So yeah, we look at what our capacity for care is. And a lot of times when we get within our capacity, we tend to be able to expand it. We're actually able to do more when we start putting in policies and protocols that work for us, right? And then we're better able to serve our community. So we looked at the data at both shelters. We looked at what we could do to decrease length of stay, because when you decrease length of stay, you have fewer animals in the shelter at any one time. So everyone gets better care. You're able to do more, right? So one area that they focused on, and this came from the shelters, okay? It's very much come under the assumption that somehow I have amazing knowledge of, that we can just put everything here in San Francisco. Like, we know what's best for everyone. We've never claimed that. But we work with the shelter to work within their community to see what is going on. So from both organizations, this was an area they wanted to focus on, right? And so just as an example of the nursery, they tried it. That is not a general practice in most shelters. It is not a common practice, but they tried it because they wanted to do something, right? It didn't go as well as planned. So when you try something and it doesn't go as well as planned, we don't want to settle on an imperfect solution, right? Because when we settle on an imperfect solution, we lose the ability to find a less imperfect solution, right? There is no perfect solution to what's being discussed here. I wish there was. But in everything that we do and everything that we decide to do, something else is not being done. So this change was come up with. They talked about it because this was a better way that they could serve animals within their shelter and service the community. We're going to try it and see how we, being your organizations, with our input and support, because that's what we do. We support animal shelters, to see how it goes. So that.
Can I ask,
yes, of course.
how do you know when you're successful?
That's
What are your
question.
metrics and how are you measuring that? And are you transparent about what equals success in this new policy?
So what do I personally consider successful?
Yeah, it says one of your areas here is population management. So,
Right.
so and infectious disease control. These all seem like, things that would play into whether or not the new policy was successful. But there have to be some metrics along the way. And I appreciate that you're looking at you're considerate of those, so are you sharing those with people? Like, this is how we're monitoring our new policy.
So it's not my policy.
No, I understand that, I
Okay.
understand that. But you're working in conjunction with people.
Yes, so we
you're fully
will
aware of the problem, and there have to be some things where, which you
Yes.
say, this outcome means we're doing well.
Yeah, so we would look at length of stay. So length of stay is a very big metric, and the reason we work on this so much is the goal of a shelter. And to be clear, I'm talking about shelters. I'm not talking about foster-based rescues. I'm talking about shelters. Our goal is always to keep animals there only for as much time as they need, right? It's not to rush them through, but it's to serve their needs for the shortest amount of time possible, because time is not on our side in the shelters. Time is the biggest risk to disease and behavioral and welfare decline. So one metric we always use is length of stay, because it's a much more powerful tool than it can appear. But if you can cut your length of stay in half, you actually are caring for half the number of animals at a time. And that is an amazing, what that does for what happens inside the shelter, like you can't imagine it until you've lived it, right? I mean, to be able to care for 50 animals versus 100, like you can provide such better care, and like you're gonna avoid disease. So looking at length of stay, how many animals you have in your care every day, how many you can get out alive. But I want to be very clear about only using your live release as a metric of success. Because in a community such as San Francisco, where many animals are being helped outside of the shelter, right? Like they don't even need to enter. Animals can be rehomed on their own, right? Like a lost animal finds their home without entering the shelter. They can go into foster. They don't ever need to enter the shelter system. As you have fewer animals entering and harder cases to deal with, so you're dealing with just the sick and the injured, as a percentage, not as a number, but as a percentage, your euthanasia will actually go up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So,
These seem like a lot of generalities.
Could you please repeat?
Can we like hear more
Could
about
you repeat
what
that
happened with the
last
actual
statement?
program?
but that's what these girls, that's what Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Valdez will speak to.
Okay. So I feel like your question was, what's the methodology behind that? You know, how are we getting at these success rates?
Right, which is what they are going to speak to. They just asked me to come because it's very much, so everyone feels that UC Davis told them to do this, and UC Davis doesn't know anything about San Francisco. And that is not, we have worked with both of these organizations and worked with them to.
Why aren't they here?
Why are you here?
No,
Why aren't they here? Why aren't
we can't have this kind of disruption from the crowd.
Give her respect.
Thank you. Dr. Carson, please continue.
I came in support of Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Vidal because they asked me to, because it is not easy to make decisions when these emotions are so high, right? And everyone cares about kittens. That should never be questioned. But we care about all the animals that come into our care. And if we try to do everything for all of them beyond our abilities in the resources that we have and in the environment that we have, we're going to compromise somewhere. Both of these organizations felt as if there were some compromises. They had to look at what they wanted to do, and these are the programs. I mean, these are not the only things going on, right? These are not the only changes being made. This is the one we're discussing today. Is that?
Can I ask a few questions? Thank you again for coming. A lot of the conversation I'm hearing from the cat volunteers focuses on this 45% mortality rate for kittens. I understand that SPCA and ACC may be better equipped to answer this question, but could you address, are you familiar with the statistic, and do you know what it encompasses? Do you know where it came from? And if not, then that's okay. That's not your number?
No.
Okay, thank you. And if I don't understand, I got a little lost in the process of how you were brought in. If I understand it, you've been working with Dr. O'Neill for a while now on her studies. And then how were you, but you're working with the ACC and the SPCA, is that correct?
Yes, our program's been working with San Francisco SPCA for many, many years.
Okay, and also with
Yes,
with
because
ACC or
the
just-
last 2 years, I've been the mentor for Dr. Roberts at
okay.
ACC, and then the mentor for Dr. O'Neill Dr. Roberts at SPCA.
Okay, so you have worked with both organizations separately, and on this issue and perhaps others, you worked jointly.
Yes, it's actually very exciting. It's kind of the first time we've had the two communicating as well and working together.
Okay, because I hear you that I do think there is a perception that UC Davis says that it should be done this way, and therefore, and thank you for clarifying that you did not swoop in and
No.
say how things should be run.
No.
But I am confused, and maybe you can answer the question. I was under the impression that SPCA made the policy change and ACC followed the policy change. But what I'm hearing from you is that maybe it was a joint decision. Do you know about this? I understand you can't speak for the organizations, but
That is
okay. Thank you. And then when we were talking about the metrics of success, and this has come up, if we look at we all agree that I think we all agree that live release rates can be massaged and manipulated, and therefore should not be the be-all end-all for all decisions. But I am curious, with this program being implemented at this time, do you, with the ACC and SPCA, do you have a way to track specific data on the number of mothers that come in, the number of kittens that come in once we're released? I think one of the concerns is that the public, perhaps not you and the shelters, but the public seems confused of what are the numbers that are being used, what criteria went into making this decision, and what criteria will be used in forming decisions moving forward.
I would like to leave it to those
Okay.
to speak to.
Right.
I mean, when I was working with both veterinarians on capacity for care, we were working on different strategies to be within their capacity for care. So this was just one of them that they worked on together, and but it's my understanding all the data that has been collected will continue to be collected.
Okay. Thank you. I think, do other people have, because I think at this point we need to hear from Dr.
Yeah.
Valdez, maybe from SPCA. Is she here? Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're now introducing Dr. Janae Valdez. Janae, okay, Director of Community Medicine at the SPCA. And Dr. Sherry O'Neill. She is the Chief Shelter Veterinarian at San Francisco Animal Care.
I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Janae Valdez. I'm a veterinarian with the San Francisco SPCA.
Microphone, please.
Nobody's ever accused me of being quiet. Is this one better?
Just
No?
you have to talk
It's better.
you have to talk closely into it.
Okay.
Having made the mistake before.
So, I'm Janae Valdez. Again, I'm a veterinarian at the San Francisco SPCA. I've been with the organization for about 6 years. I've worn many hats. I was a general practitioner for a long time. Spent about 3 years working in the shelter, and most recently, about a year and a half ago, began to oversee the community medicine program. And that is our spay-neuter program, which provides a lot of the TNR for our community cats. And I also oversee the community cats program, which is specifically mamas from the streets and the other TNR efforts that we have as part of our program. Introduce Dr.
Is that okay? I have to really very tall, right? And apologies for the way this is set up, because my back is to you, but the screen is that way, and it's not ideal. I'll try. So I'm Dr. Sherry O'Neill, long-time attendant of this, both as a voting member and now as a representative of San Francisco Animal Care Control. Sorry, I'll try better. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So just as an introduction, I mean, I think that in listening to the previous few people speak and just the questions from the commissioners, that there is a lot of confusion, and there still is, for a lot of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, I do want to recognize all the fabulous volunteers in the room. I mean, Jen Clark is amazing, and yeah, we give her all the complicated cases because she has great success rate. And I'd say thousands of lives have been saved because of the people sitting behind me. So no one is questioning the commitment or compassion that these folks have, and we absolutely need their help and hope that they will continue to work with us moving forward on this issue and others. So that is definitely not in question. The second piece is, to Dr. Carson's point, is that this is not something that was a decision that was come to abruptly, although it seems to kind of have rolled out that way. I mean, I've been part of the fellowship, and the kind of community cat project was mostly Dr. Roberts because they kind of held that. But we were trying to work together to figure out, you know, this is a San Francisco community cat problem. It just makes sense for both organizations to come together and figure out what's the best thing that both of us can do, either separately or together, to understand the problem a little bit more, and to provide the best care and welfare that we can for this population. It's a unique population to have to deal with, and I think San Francisco is unique, is that we're trying things nobody else is trying, and we may fail at it, and we may need to try again. And we're doing a really great job, and we want to continue to do better. So I think historically, probably before our time, relationship was not there. It was not great. But I think as leadership has changed, and certainly as I've come into my position, the medical staff started getting along really well, and it just was very seamless in getting care for the animals, which was the whole goal. And then it's kind of expanded to including the administration and others. So I think we're at a unique position where we weren't ever in a place to even have this conversation 3 or 5 years ago. And so we're not operating in our silo anymore, right? We're more transparent, we're having more communication, because I know what happens in my building, and she knows what happens in her side, but have we looked at it in a holistic way before? No. So, things would go over to the nursery, but I don't know the outcomes of what was happening there. ACC traditionally takes the very young, small kittens, and that's, not her department either, but how can we look at it all together? So it's not something that was come too quickly. It's been a conversation for a while, and the organizations are actually working really well together to try and address these bigger issues that we're feeling like we're more capable of taking on. So just to get that piece. And this was not the plan for the rollout of this at all. So, and I recognize that, and it's led to a lot of bad feelings, which was not at all our intention. So while this discussion was happening, and it was just that, a discussion on how best to look at this, as far as what it looks like organizationally, that is still happening. So what happened was, the email question about one particular case that turned into we're looking at this problem, escalated into decisions have been made, and what is this based, and emotions are high, and people have strong feelings, and believe me, we want to save lives too. And this
Could
is
you
not our
clarify,
intention.
we're not familiar with a single email that escalated. Are you saying that this was in the works and that one thing, that one
Yeah.
case sort of was the catalyst
Was
to?
the catalyst for a lot of misinformation and, kind of, it's not how we wanted it to happen, but then we started getting the questions. And so we started to respond to the questions the best that we can, and it is a work in progress, and it's new to us too. So it's not without, it's not perfect, we're building it. So our intention had been to finish those conversations, build all that out, have all the information on the training and what the call law algorithms look like and all those things in a more completed state before we were here. But here we are. So we've been in response mode, and we're still trying to do that other work as well. So it was not our intention, and unfortunately that's how events unfolded, and it's leading to a lot of bad feelings all around. So
So could you?
Just to preface that.
Yeah.
So
Does your presentation help
Yes.
us understand?
just the context of kind of where we are. So this presentation is one that's been tweaked just ever so slightly from presentations that myself and Ariana, the operations manager at ACC, gave to our staff. So we did it kind of division by division. I can say on my end, we had a couple of office hours for folks to come and talk to us that have concerns. We've had a number of opportunities for people to come and talk to us, volunteers mostly, but staff too. And I know SPCA has done the same thing. So ideally, that would have all happened first. But this is something that has, lots of other people have seen this same information. Understanding that you're not shelter staff added just a little bit more information. So stop me if that needs clarification. All right, so let's back way up and talk about what a community cat is, just because I know there's plenty of experts in the room on what that looks like, but for the commissioners, a community cat includes a lot of different cats in this population, but it's cats in our neighborhood, in our city that live here. They could be feral or unsocialized, which is part of the population we're talking about here. They could be friendly, they could be loosely owned, they could be your neighbor's cat, that's an in and out cat, but these are all the cats that we may encounter in our community, and all of them have maybe a little bit different need of what the shelter needs to do for them. And I think we can all agree, the feral cats can be happy outdoors and healthy. I've certainly seen many senior ferals come in at the end of their life, and they're still fighting. They're amazing. And cats are amazingly resilient. They can be healthy. They're not a threat to public health, and they have a place here. So I would love it if TNR was so successful, and we just don't have this population anymore. But it's the reality of dealing with this, and all communities kind of deal with this. So I think that's what makes it so difficult, is because the community cat is kind of this umbrella term that they can look like a lot of different things. Community cats exist in the wild. Certainly they can be completely feral and not wanting human contact. But cats also exist as pets. So when you see a cat outside, it's kind of hard mentally to make that jump that says that cat doesn't need to be, it needs to be in a home, where that may not be the best choice for that cat, but they look the same. This population has a lot of intervention. We are doing TNR, some places are doing a lot of investment in rehoming, we're trying to adopt these cats, there's the euthanasia programs, all those kinds of things. And again, just by looking at the cat, you can't necessarily know if it's adapted to the outside just based on appearance. If it's a healthy looking cat, it's probably doing fine, and it's got plenty of resources. If it's a lost cat that seems in distress, well, obviously that's a different problem. And just because they're social doesn't mean that they're not okay outside either. Because we do have, in and out cats, and there are certainly risks that people understand as cat owners to let their cat in and out. But it happens, and it's not unusual that those cats end up at the shelter, and then their people come down and they're like, oh, Sparky is here again, and he's just, doing his thing. So on the other side, you know, I think the opossum babies are super cute and the raccoons too, but they don't need the same kind of help. They don't need to stay in my shelter. There's not a lot I can do for them. If they're sick or injured, you know, that's when we want to intervene, but for the most part, we leave those populations alone. So what has been tried and kind of where are we now? So it wasn't that long ago that, you know, we've been dealing with this population for a long time and how to figure out how and when to intervene or if to intervene or what to do. It was not uncommon that feral cats, and this certainly still happens in other parts of the country, they come to the shelter because it's thought to be cruel to leave them on the street. And this would result in a large number of cats being euthanized because they're unacceptable candidates for adoption. And it was intended originally to be a means of population control. And we know that didn't work, right? So no one wants to euthanize large numbers of cats. I mean, it was really awful for the shelter staff that had to do that. And it certainly was not saving lives, and it was just not what a welfare organization is meant to be doing. So once you know better, you do better. And then, you know, Trap-Neuter-Release came into favor and has been very successful. And again, not without the help of all the folks sitting behind me that launched a, you know, huge active campaign to go out and Trap-Neuter-Release. And that is why our numbers have steadily gone down. I don't think they'll ever go to zero because, you know, you can't touch all of them. But it's been very successful, and we have no question that that's going to still be a very active program. So then the question becomes, okay, so how can we do even better to give the most positive outcomes to this group? And then there are the other interventions that have already been discussed, like, you know, it's TNR, is it return to field, if it's the, you know, healthy cat that doesn't need our help. Certainly we do a lot of orphan fostering for those kids that are truly orphaned. And then just doing a better job of public awareness about this population, because I don't think that we've done a good job of that in the past. So we're looking at that as well. So this is kind of how the conversation started. We're realizing that this population deserves the same consideration as any other animal coming through our doors. And we're working towards making evidence-based decisions based on the outcomes and, you know, how many lives are saved. And the intent is to maximize the life-saving capability that we have. And it includes looking at this program that was just not meeting the needs. I think that, I mean, that's what Dr. Karsten was helping us with. He was saying, you know, we have staff coming to us saying, this isn't right, I don't feel comfortable, this doesn't seem okay by the cat. Then let's look at it and see if we can do a better job. So what have we tried? So, I mean, as far as ACC goes, we've certainly done the feral queen and fosters and feral queens and kittens in foster homes. We've had a limited number in the shelter, and then some of those, a lot of those will be transferred to SPCA for the feral cat nursery. And then we have done some behavior treatment plans for kittens under 5 months. And then what have the results been? I mean, from our experience, and again, everyone has their individual experience, but what we're talking about is an overall picture, is that, again, with the increased length of stay and, you know, being in an environment that's not normal for the feral cat, we do get increased illness and fading kittens. And we have serious concerns about the welfare for the queen, especially in the shelter. And mamas from the streets regularly have the same problems. In fact, having really severe illness that really impacted the health and welfare of the cats and the kittens, and sometimes had lasting effects after their stay. And then our behavior strategies, I mean, these kittens were spored before they went out and were in foster for sometimes many weeks. And then when they returned, they were a much older kitten and still scored behaviorally similarly, so that they weren't adoption ready. And so now we have an older kitten that is a little bit, you know, aged up and is not as cute as the other ones, plus is not particularly friendly And it's not, it's been out of the outdoor environment for a long time. They were kind of in a limbo state as to what the best placement for that cat is. And those are really challenging ones to place when they haven't improved. So when we're talking about welfare, what is it that we're actually talking about? And so in the sheltering world, we refer to the 5 freedoms, and there's kind of a 5.5 or a 6 if you add on the last one. But this is what we strive for every animal in our care. And it's going to be different for every individual, but the idea is to check as many of these boxes as we can during the animal's stay with us. So, some of these seem pretty easy. Hunger and thirst. Well, of course, we're going to give them food and water. But this may look to me like when I'm on rounds and I see, oh, there's a cat or a dog not eating, well, maybe it's got dental disease and it needs soft food. Or maybe it just needs a kitty buffet to find something that appeals. But these are things that we pay attention to. We provide it, but sometimes it's not accepted. And so we have to kind of work around that. And freedom from discomfort. We certainly want to give them as appropriate environment as possible. So this means we have double-sided cages for the cats with perches, and we separate their food from the litter box, and we try and give the dogs double-sided runs and as much space as they possibly can. But we're never going to be perfect because it's a shelter. It's not the outdoors for the feral cat, and it's not someone's living room for the other cats. We're never going to be perfect, and we understand that, but we do the best that we can, and the shelter is meant to be a temporary place to be. So if they're not there very long, I feel like, we can accommodate that. So this may look like a senior dog who has a raised bed and just well, maybe that needs to be lowered, and maybe he needs a mat so he's not slipping. So you can, tweak little things here and there to make the animal as comfortable as possible. Freedom from pain, injury, or disease. That's a simple one. I walk through and say, I see, this cat has sneezing, nasal discharge, and problems with the eyes. Let's move it to a different place. Let's give it antibiotics. Let's treat the eyes. Simple, straightforward. We get the cat better. Things move on. Normal behavior is another really challenging one that, we'll never quite hit. Some of this is like playgroup for dogs, or again, enough space to be able to, for a cat, that means being able to stretch up all the way and have their head fully extended and their tail up, stretching posts, things like that. So those are easy adjustments that we can make if we see that. I might walk by and say, oh, cat's pooped outside the litter box, let's give him another substrate, another choice so that he can make a better decision. So we can do those things. Fear and distress is another one that we'll never quite tick. Even the most laid-back dog is still in the shelter setting. So there's noise, they're not in control of making their own choices. There's other dogs, other animals, strange people coming and going. The schedule's not always the same. So that can be stressful when you're not in control of making your own choices. And certainly freedom from euthanasia. None of us want the animal to come in whose only option is euthanasia unless it's clear that there's a significant amount of pain and suffering, and that's the best choice for that animal. But we don't euthanize for space because we're doing a good job. We don't euthanize cats for behavior problems. That's not our issue, and we're lucky not to have that problem. But nobody wants to make that decision. But what this looks like for the feral queen is a lot more complicated. It's not as easy as, making small adjustments like that. So, they may not be eating well. They're certainly very stressed. Dr. Valdez will talk about, kind of what was seen in the nursery. They're uncomfortable. They may never relax. Again, every cat is a little bit different as far as what they need. Pain, injury, and disease. When we have feral cats that need treatment, it's almost impossible to treat them. The last thing they want is a contact with human beings. Me coming in there to put eye medication in it twice a day is going to not end well for either one of us. And certainly freedom from fear and distress. We don't want to stress our patients. That's not what we're here to do. So we need to strike a balance. We're never going to be perfect. But the idea is to strike a balance so that every animal gets consideration.
So as Dr. O'Neill mentioned, we always try to keep the 5 freedoms in mind and consider how and if our facilities and practices are or maybe are not meeting those needs. So the photo that you see here is actually a picture of our nursery. We thought a lot about where we would put this and chose a corridor at the back of our hospital that was going to be low foot traffic and hopefully a nice quiet place for these queens and kittens to spend their time. And last year we provided housing for about 35 moms and their kittens. And as we really started to pay attention and think about sort of the welfare aspects of this configuration, we realized that there are a couple of things that we weren't checking off welfare-wise. This configuration didn't give them enough room to allow normal behaviors. We gave them the double wide with the portal in the middle, which let them have food and water on one side and resting spaces on another. But we really realized that we weren't able to give them the space to exercise or move around. The queens themselves were really close to other queens, so there was a room full of these mother cats, and typically they're a little more solitary, and the sights and smells and honestly the noises from the other cats were distressing to some of the queens that were in there. We did our best with visual barriers. That's the towel that you see there, but still, smells and noise travel. And we realized these poor ladies couldn't take a break from their kittens. I think all moms at some point need a little bit of time away, and they weren't able to do that. And really, it became more of a question for us when the staff who were trying to care for them brought to our attention that some of these queens were actually getting very stressed out and actually aggressive. And there were a few instances where the staff started to ask the question about whether we were really fulfilling the welfare needs for these queens. We did have aggressive queens who charged and wouldn't let the staff handle the kittens. They tried to bite or scratch them. If you notice in the picture, there's an orange arrow there, and that's pointing to what we started to call the kitten grabber, which is basically a tool that we use to take the kittens out to weigh them and provide medical care. And part of the reason we use those is because we were seeing staff injuries from feral moms who were trying to strike and bite the staff as they were trying to provide care. And eventually got to the point where sheltering best practices say that weighing kittens frequently is a great indicator of health and how they're doing, and a healthy kitten will continue to gain weight. After a certain point, we decided that it wasn't worth the stress both to the queen and our staff to try to be in there as frequently as we were to weigh these little guys. So we actually decreased the frequency to take that stress level down. We had instances of queens escaping, and that required us to use a net or a trap to catch them. And again, extremely stressful for both the animal and for staff. So in thinking a little bit more, we also tried to try a different approach, fostering outside of the shelter. But we also realized that the multiple transports weren't the ideal situation for the cats. So in thinking more about this question, again, I'd like to emphasize that it really was the staff who were interacting with these cats daily who had concerns about their safety and, most importantly, whether we were really providing what we could welfare-wise for these cats. We started thinking about the differences in our approach for these populations. Essentially, we have two competing interests. We have kittens who really benefit from lots of human interaction and enrichment and desensitization. And then we have these queens who would just love to be left alone and really don't handle the stress of multiple interactions well. So this is a picture that one of our volunteers took, actually, of a mama cat who spent most of her 6 weeks in her cage, and because she was so stressed and fearfully aggressive, she didn't get her bedding changed or the cage cleaned very frequently.
It's a room, not a cage.
Exactly.
So,
She was not in a cage.
It's the facility.
So one of the things that we also noticed, we had sort of two extremes. We saw the queens who were striking and fearfully aggressive, and then we also had the flip side, which were cats who were abnormally passive. And this is a behavior that we know as learned helplessness. So essentially it's a defense mechanism when animals are under prolonged periods of stress. A lot of times they essentially freeze and shut down and allow handling as a path of least resistance. And it's tempting to think of this as these cats becoming tame or acclimated to the environment, but it's no, this is really a stress response in a lot of cases. And to go along with that, we also noticed other indicators of stress, specifically queens who were straining to urinate or urinating blood or blood-tinged urine. And this is a known medical condition that happens with house cats and feral cats. It's a manifestation of stress in cats. And these were all things that we saw that really led us to ask the question, are we really ticking off the boxes that we can as far as the 5 freedoms for these cats? It didn't feel like we could provide freedom from discomfort. It didn't feel like we could provide freedom from distress or fear or freedom to express their natural behaviors. And I think it's important to point out that this really was something that was brought to us from the people who were caring for these cats every single day and who are very skilled. They take care of thousands of animals that pass through our shelter's doors. So I'd consider them well versed in how to treat these animals, and the fact that they had safety and welfare concerns really meant that we felt we needed to address this. So I'd like to be clear, this is not a budget issue, this is a welfare issue. And based upon our numerous experiences and this desire to continually do better, we reached out to UC Davis and other organizations to sort of help us consider how we might address this problem.
Okay, and I think, Dr. Valdez covered this pretty well, but the welfare of the queen certainly impacts the kittens, and her stress has effects on the kittens as well. And as we've already talked about, the longer they stay and the higher their stress level, the more likely they are to develop disease, which keeps them in the shelter longer and creates a considerable concern for the logistics on treating these cats with any regularity. Some of the kittens get rejected too early. Certainly they're not able to have normal behavior when they're in this environment. They're not really learning to be a cat, and with the queen there, it's really difficult to handle the kittens, moving the kittens away from her for socialization as well. We do see higher mortality and both the kittens and the queen. So, I think the big discussion here is, certainly the cats that were in the nursery, we've seen that their length of stay was long, and that they were not particularly acclimated to the shelter for that whole time. And we're not talking, a long length of stay in a shelter is 2 weeks. Normal hold periods, 5 days, sometimes 7, maybe 10, and then that animal has kind of moved on and wherever their outcome is going to be. These families are coming in, and if the kittens are very young, they could be there for 4 to 6 weeks. So when you see that picture of that queen huddled in the bath with all her kittens on top of her, and her area not being able to be cleaned, and the kittens not being able to be handled, that was every minute of her life for a month plus. So weighing that, again, just looking at can we do better and how can we do better? And we're not going to be perfect, but it's a compromise of meeting in the middle for everyone's needs. So, there's been some discussion in some of the other venues about foster capacity and, people certainly willing to do this. And we'll get to that in a second as well, but just because we can do it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. And it's, it's been tried, and I know they started with the nursery and then they started moving cats to people's offices and trying different things, and, they're kind of seeing the same thing. So the idea is, the nursery as a program just wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. So the impacts, as we've already heard before from Dr. Carson, coming into the shelter is not risk-free. And I understand, staying outside is not risk-free either. So again, it's striking a balance as to if and when we need to intervene to help the most cats in the best way we can. So we've already talked about feral queens experiencing very high stress scores and have a long length of stay. And again, that is directly related to the longer they stay, the more likely it is for them to get sick, which means they may stay longer for treatment before they're available to kind of either go to surgery or if they're kidding, go to the adoption floor. And then that's a lot of staff time and work as well. It's who's medicating the cats, who's taking care of that, who's making sure they're moving to a different part of the shelter if they need to. And this is, kittens under the 4 weeks of age that are impounded at ACC do have a mortality rate of about 45%. And this is all cats across the board, counting coming in based on age of the kitten being under that age. And I understand, the data is not perfect. Not everybody can age a kitten well. I mean, if they're impounded at the shelter, it's staff doing it, so one would hope it's slightly more accurate. But it's not a perfect system either, aging on weight or teeth. There's it's somewhat subjective. But this didn't sound great to me either. And I mean, this is, again, ACC takes the younger kittens, we take the orphan kittens. SPCA generally takes the weaned kittens. That's just generally how we've divided and conquered. And that's why we rely on our foster homes to do that. But we do lose kittens. Young kittens die. They do. And it's not a reflection on the foster by any means. I mean, I can't tell you how many countless times I've had to counsel fosters that bring me kittens that are failing, and we ended up needing to euthanize the kitten. It's awful. They feel that they failed, and that's not at all true. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, it does happen. We do lose the young kittens. But if they come in when they're older, their chances of making it out are dramatically improved. So the idea behind the new policy is to see if we can just delay intake by a short period of time so that their chances of getting out healthy and following a normal pathway are so much more improved. It's a huge burden and commitment on the fosters and also on our staff too. Nobody wants to euthanize kittens. It's the worst feeling in the world. And especially when you do lose, in the height of the season, a lot of young kittens, that doesn't feel good for anyone. So again, the idea is to try and strike a balance to give everybody the best chance that they have if they're coming into the shelter that they're getting out. So again, that's kind of where we are on those numbers. And these are based on, again, the way that we're collecting the data doesn't specify all those details. And we do keep track of who came in when, so we can track if there was mom with kittens. You have to kind of finagle the data to get that piece of information out, but we don't classify them as feral or non-feral. They may come in a trap. I mean, it's just the way that the computer system allows you to enter how much data you can get and then what you can pull out of it. So it's not a perfect system, and it certainly can be improved on, but what we do know is that SPCA numbers are very similar as far as mortality rate in that age group, in that older age group. So these were our guiding principles about why we're making some changes and how we move forward together. We're still all behind TNR, it's not going away. Community cats can be healthy and thrive outdoors. All cats have stress in the shelter. It's the nature of being in the shelter. But the feral cat is much more affected because it's so different from their normal environment. And then attempting to socialize the feral cat is not effective or humane. I mean, this speaks to the older kittens, which is not the mainstay of this. But again, as soon as we can make that determination and get everybody to their endpoint and get the services they need and not have them staying in the shelter system, for the better. So this is the community cat pathway as we kind of spelled it out. So again, remember that this is still ongoing discussion about how the details are going to be worked out because it's not the rollout that we wanted. But orphan kitten calls still come into both organizations, and then we have more open-ended conversations with the caller about what is an orphan kitten and what do they look like, because we don't want to take the kittens away from mom if she's there, right? So we want the family to stay together. So there's a lot of public education that we need to do around this, and it's not asking someone, how old is the kitten? You know, to Jen's point, well, you know, the eyes closed but they're running around, well, that just doesn't make sense. So if you ask other questions to get to trying to figure out the age of the kitten, and pictures if it's required. Like there's a lot that we can do around this to figure out what it is, the situation that we're dealing with. So newborn to 8-week kittens that are orphan come to ACC. There's no change. That's always been the way, continue to be the way. The only piece, sorry, go ahead. The next piece down is the part that we're looking for a compromise. So the non-mobile kitten, these newborns up to 4 weeks, which is the youngest age at which they would start to be weaned and kind of be a little more independent. We would prefer to delay their intake. We're not saying not come in. We're saying maybe just not right now, if they're okay, to come in when the kittens are a bit older so that the family can be safely separated and everybody gets what they need. So kittens go to foster, they get socialized, they get everything that they need health-wise. The queen can go to TNR and be released and not have to stay in the shelter or in a foster home for an extended period of time. So there's a lot of discussion around, you know, what that looks like. I mean, these are calls that the front desk staff takes, these are calls that community cat takes on a regular basis. And again, we have a kind of a call system algorithm to kind of go through, you know, what are you seeing, if this, then that, questions to ask. I think, you know, Laura's certainly open to having pictures. If we need to send somebody out, we send somebody out. The concern is, you know, there will be some retraining around the trapping piece because, you know, the sense from some folks is that there is no safe place, period, for any of these cats, and they all need to come in. And again, the nursery cats, we're talking about 30 cats a year that were part of that program, and each organization takes in about 2,800 cats a year. So in the grand scheme of things, and again, we have to look at everything that's happening in the shelter and still give this population its due consideration. Managing all of that, if we can delay intake by a short period of time, will really help both of us out in providing the care that they need as quickly as possible so that everybody has a good outcome. Everything else has not changed that much, but we realize that the education is ongoing. So we have new flyers about, do you see kittens? Do you see cats? Kind of going through just briefly what that looks like, contacts, resources, help for our animal control officers that are in the field having these conversations. Any help from the public, you know, they're calling in right at the front desk. This is an opportunity to do some education. So again, asking open-ended questions, trying to figure out the age, the location, getting all the details, photos, and kind of next steps. And then the calls for the queens will be logged. Like when people call in and say, I'm seeing this, it doesn't just disappear. You know, we keep track of the location and the contact person. We share all that information with the community outreach folks at SPCA, who will call and check in with these folks right away and keep tabs on what's going on. So if something changes, there's a relationship building there, and then when the trapper needs to go out, then they will arrange for that to happen. So the idea is to have a common trapper pool. We don't have so many that we call on our end, but the idea is that we'll pull from the same pool. So once we have a little bit of training behind what it is we're looking for and how to do some public education around it, we can pull from the same group of people so that it's very consistent. Because I think in the past, it's kind of inconsistent depending on which organization you would call. You may get a different answer, or the trapper may come, or animal control may get involved, and it was all kind of convoluted. So the idea is to pair up, share all the information, keep it in one central location so we can have some information about what's happening, because we don't. Historically, we have not shared data. Historically, we have not tracked this very well. So that's where we're starting, and we hope to be able to do that as we move forward.
Sure.
Yes.
Are you talking about sharing data between the SPCA and the ACC?
Yes.
Or are you talking about the ACC, SPCA, and the rescue community?
Well, I'm talking specifically about animals that are going to be impounded at the shelter. Because once they are in our care, then it's our place to find the outcome. I think what's happened historically before is everyone's doing their own thing, and everyone may be doing their own thing well, but what happens is the trappers bring the cats in, and they're excellent at that. I can't trap a cat, I recognize that. They bring them in, and then, we're responsible for them from there on. Once they're in the shelter system, they're in the system. So then it becomes a figuring out what to do. Are they acceptable for this program? What is the exit game? That's how the shelter game works. Any animal that comes in, you have to start planning the exit strategy day one. Where are we going with this? How can we get this animal out of here as quickly as possible and give it everything that it needs? Does it need to be here? That's one of the challenges I face as the open door shelter. Some of the animals that come in may not need our help, or may not need our help right then. So anything that I can do to manage the intake before they come will help me sort out everybody else that we're also trying to work this pathway for as well. And some of those are in my control, and some of them are not in my control. So once they're in the shelter system, then it's up to us to arrange for their care while they're in our stay, arrange for spay neuter, do all the vaccinations, do all the medical care, do all the adoption work. That's all a lot of staff and time for each individual. And we're certainly willing to do it, that's what we do. But it's not historically been the responsibility of the independent shelter, foster groups or rescue groups to do that piece. We work with them, but we're providing that support too. So even though we have a lot of great fosters and we have a lot of foster homes, those animals are still in our care. They're still part of our system, and still have to go figure out what their pathway is going to be. So, as far as it being on the shelters to manage that, and that's kind of our perspective. There's nothing saying that any of the rescues can't find adopters on their own or do these kind of things, but they also have a lot of, they're taxed too. Not everyone has infinite resources to be able to do all that start to finish. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Is that the end of your?
Yeah, the rest of the pathway is the same. Nothing else has changed with that. Sick and injured animals always impounded at ACC. Trap-Neuter-Release and return to field is not going away. Feral cats with tipped ears that are healthy, stay where they are. The rest of this has not changed. The only population that we're talking about is delaying the intake of the kittens with the queens for, hopefully as little as possible, but to increase their chance of survival and for a good outcome, and then not doing unnecessary sheltering when we don't have to. That's really what's changed. Still, we're responding to anything sick, injured, and what we want to do is reserve those spots for the animals that really need it. Yes, if they're in danger, if they've been injured, they absolutely need our help and we want them to come in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for providing some clarity. As I understand it, there were two main concerns by members of the cat community. One was that the dissemination of information was poorly executed and the volunteers had very little information and had to sort of track it down on their own or word of mouth. I hear from you, Dr. O'Neill, that we now know that that was a mistake, and that was not supposed to be the protocol. And so in the future, we will expect more standardized protocol where the volunteers have the information as they need it. Is that what I understand correctly?
I mean, again, this was not an announcement. This was not a rollout. This was a random email that a few people got a hold of and just kind of
But there should have been.
Went viral from there. This was a discussion between organizations. It still is. This is still a work in progress, and we've jumped way ahead of ourselves as far as where we are with all of this. And instead, we've been responding instead of working towards the issue. So we're getting there.
In the future, we can expect communication to be rolled out more smoothly in a timely manner. Is that what we can?
I mean, my hope is that I don't have a lot of control over a rogue email discussion that happened outside of.
No, I'm not talking about rogue.
Yeah, that wasn't our intention at all.
Your intention
would be
make an
to have
announcement
it in a more solid state.
And so that we can expect that going forward, and that will hopefully solve many of the problems.
Of course.
Yes, thank you. And then another big issue that I've heard from the CAT community is there's a question around what are the metrics of success, what were the metrics in the past, and how do we gauge, as Commissioner Tobin said, how can you gauge if the new program is being successful or not? And as I hear your presentation, Dr. Valdez, I hear anecdotal stories from volunteers about what they're seeing and feeling in stressed cats. And if we are going to make decisions on the anecdotal, then I can assume that when we follow up with these volunteers, anecdotally, they will tell us that we are not seeing stressed mamas in the cages. We are not seeing a mama who hasn't had her bed changed in 4 weeks because they're not there. So if we're relying on anecdotes to make these decisions, what are the anecdotes that are going to tell us that this system, the new program, is working or not?
And I'd like to add to that too, we don't know any of the metrics in the field, so when a call comes in and you know of a situation, who's monitoring the success of those 5 kittens, say, and that mother? And if that, to me, it seems like if you're moving the shelter responsibility out into the field for it to take care of itself, then someone needs to be looking after it to make sure that those numbers make sense. That what you were doing in the shelter before was worse than what's happening out there, or vice versa. So how are you going to do that?
Just to respond to your comment first, to clarify, this is staff members who were providing the
Yes, understood.
Staff, yeah,
right, in-house staff members.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. No, I know it was
Okay.
staff members. Yes.
Right.
Right.
So.
No, I'm not just crediting what they're
Oh,
saying
no.
at all. I'm just saying that's not. I mean, if we're making decisions based on statistics, I didn't see any statistics. I heard anecdotes.
Right. The unfortunate.
Microphone, please.
The unfortunate truth is we don't have great statistics. We honestly are in a learning process right now ourselves and realize whether there are things that we should be collecting that we don't have right now. And so, measures of success are really going to depend upon starting to collect data and knowing which data to collect. I wish we had a perfect solution for that, and we don't.
So is that another lesson learned, is
Absolutely.
that the data needs to be, and one of the things that we heard is this 45% mortality rate, but if I understand, it's not clear if that mortality rate is from the community cats or if it's formerly housed cats, or it's just a cat. That's all we know, right? And is there
to that.
can we expect there to be more?
It's all, so again, historically, the data on, so there was an issue with the age of the cat at impound. So if someone puts in 6 months in the computer, that animal is perpetually 6 months old. So we have done a lot of retraining about, how to properly do it so that the age moves forward with the animal in time. We've also done a lot of education about properly aging kittens, but it's not data that we've pulled out in this way before, which is what this whole conversation was, because this was a big question mark. So it's like, okay, let's have a conversation about what is happening. We're seeing things that is a really a big welfare concern for us. And so I don't know that, I mean, for me, I don't go around and count how many things I correct on a daily basis for all the other animals as far as a welfare concern, but if I see it, then I respond. But I'm not counting it, because that's just my job, is to make sure that we're doing the best we can for all the animals in our care. So I don't know that we need a count of how many queens suffered. I mean, what we do know is that 30 queens were in the program that made it out, and that we know that when they were there, certainly we are not meeting or certainly exceeding, which is what we would like to do, just the basic welfare care for that.
But a year from now, when we have this conversation, can we expect to hear more granularity around those numbers? Kittens versus the mamas versus community versus, is that something that you are working towards?
Right, so because we have different ways of collecting data, I mean, that was part of the conversation as well. How are they counted? Are they counted as a group? Are they counted individually? And so pulling that out was challenging. So the best number we could come up with is to say all kittens under that age. They could be orphans, they could be, I mean, it counted everyone. Everyone gets one count, they're not counted as a group. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, Dr. Valdez's challenge has been, this was not her program. The folks that had the program left under not so great circumstances, it sounds like, and a lot of that data just wasn't there or went away. It was difficult to interpret as someone coming in after saying, okay, well, what is happening there? So this was the conversation. We don't know a lot, but what we do know is we would like to do better. And when we look at it, there's such a difference with that age, and then seeing what we're seeing. That's our starting point.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Going back to just part of the discussion where you were saying success and failure with these queens once they had come into your system, you had mentioned that there were problems with home fosters, not pets. I mean, if we assume that under 4 weeks old, not weaned, shelter's a really bad place for you, but if Jen has available foster homes within the volunteer community, you mentioned that transporting these queens led to a problem. How many times were they transported, and what were the breakdowns in those cats' management that you saw?
I mean, again, as far as the fosters go, it's not, I don't think the SPCA did a lot of fostering. I mean, ours has been on demand because that's how it's always been. I mean, we did send a fair number of cats your way. So I think everyone's personal experience is different, and it has a lot to do with matching the skill set of the foster parent with the animal that you're giving them. So, Jen has a great track record, and I'm not disputing that at all, and her experience has been great. But we've had others where it hasn't been so great. I mean, we've had some that, the lady's calling saying, I have this feral queen with these kittens, I can't get in my bathroom, she's attacking me, and I had to send a control officer over to trap the cat and bring it back. So it's sometimes it's a mismatch of fitting the right foster, and it happens too with the small kittens. Some people are really great at bottle feeding and doing those high needs kittens, and other people aren't, and that's okay. And again, it's not necessarily a number of foster homes that's the issue. It's that once they're in the shelter system, those animals all count, and we have to find a way to care for them the best way that we can, provide all the medical care and the adoption piece when they come back, and the spay-neuter. So we would like to decrease their length of stay so they move through more quickly. Everybody still is getting what they need, but they're moving through the shelter in a much quicker way and using less of our resources and saving those really skilled foster homes for the ones that really truly do need it, that really need to come in, they really do need our help. That's what we're here for.
Is the ultimate goal in this change by decreasing the length of stay to save more cats? Overall, what's the goal overall?
I mean, the goal always is to save more lives. and the goal also is to meet everyone's needs. So, again, it's a balancing act. We're not going to be perfect. I think we do very well that we have a light release rate that's so high, but again, that's not the only metric to measure success. And it's not necessarily adoptions, because the endpoint is not necessarily adoptions. I mean, I understand it too. I mean, I look at that and I say 45% of the kids don't make it, and that's difficult on everyone. Sometimes again, as a trapper, and you bring them in, or member of the public, you bring them in, you turn them over, and you're like, that felt great. I did everything I could to get that animal where it needs to go. I'm the hero, that animal's going to be adopted. But that's not how it happens all the time. And so I do the same thing. I have a difficult case or a really difficult placement, and I call my colleagues across the street and say, can you please take this medical case? This one that we can handle. And they say, sure. And I say, great. That cat's going to be awesome, and it's going to be on the adoption floor. And I know that's not the reality, but for my own heart and soul, I sometimes need to believe that. Because you want to feel like you're doing the best that you can for these guys. And when you see them suffering and sick and dying, it doesn't feel great for anybody. And again, sometimes you just have to believe, like, you get them to a certain point, and that's fine. But then what happens after? It's the what happens after, what happens next, that started the whole conversation. Like, getting into the shelter is one thing, but man, there's a whole lot of other things that need to happen before they get out. And they don't all go to the adoption floor, and that's okay too. Maybe they do go to rescue. But we want them all to have an endpoint, and to get there as quickly as possible, and then hopefully as healthy as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So first, what does the 45% even represent? You don't know what that number represents.
So again, I mean, this was a response to, tell us what numbers that you have.
No, I'm saying what's the numerical number? Like, is it 465 cats, or like?
I would have to look at the raw data again to see, because we did it as a percentage because it was all age groups. And so, because it's difficult to pull out the different pieces of it, just because of the way the data went into the system.
I just feel like when you see a percentage, that kind of is a little bit.
I need the audience to be quiet, please, so we can continue the discussion. We will have time for public comment, but we need to get through the questions and answers of the commissioners first.
So my biggest question that I started out with was, when ACC and the SPCA were even discussing these policy changes, and I don't even know if you've seen like the data really behind it yet, but did you guys involve the stakeholders throughout this and actually show them the data? Because it really seems like a lot of these stakeholders in here didn't really understand the policy fully. And my second part to that is there a timeline of rollout? And is that something that you guys normally would use? And what does that mean that they're engaging your stakeholders? Are you just asking a couple? Are you asking the head of organizations? Are you having a community town hall? What does that entail?
So I can speak for our organization. We actually started these discussions, I want to say in February, and we invited our core group of cat trappers, and we called it the Community Cats Guiding Coalition. So we did have input from several of the people in the room, and involved them at that level. I think Dr. O'Neill made it pretty clear that circumstances beyond our control had that information go out while it was still in discussion phases, including input from the volunteers. And so this rollout is not what we expected or anticipated, or the way we would have wanted it to go.
Can I follow up on that?
Mm-hmm.
That was the big question that I seemingly had. Sorry, I don't want you, Rachel. You are admittedly relying on this rescue community to assist you in all of this, and they are a big part of this equation. No matter what your decision is going forward, you are consequently relying on them to follow your actions. The big problem that I see right here is they don't seem to have been involved in this situation at all when they're the actual people on the ground. Not that you're not doing these things as well. They're the people out there trapping the feral cats. They're the people, and putting their homes up, opening their homes to these animals day and night. They're spending their own money, they're doing all of this. They're following all of your 5 process of care. They're doing all of that. I just don't understand. I absolutely agree with their frustration. What Rachel was saying is that they don't seem to have been involved in this process, yet they're being forced to rely on what your decision is.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, that's a big one, you know, asking a few trappers when there's people in the room that sound like they've been spending decades doing this work. Having a few bad interactions with a feral cat in that situation is kind of obvious. You know, a feral cat's gonna protect their kittens. It's not gonna be a good situation, but it's a better situation than them being outside in someone's backyard. I've actually had this issue recently happen, and you know, my friends have in their backyard kittens that just populated one day, and they were given advice to just let them be until they started moving around. Well, they were already there, and they didn't get good answers, they didn't get what to do. They felt like they had to do it all of themselves and go and get help. They felt like when they called ACC, they did not get the right help and care. And it was really sad because at the end of the day, this is a larger issue than even just the cats. All the feral cats outside destroy our bird populations. You know, it's not just that these animals are in the backyard and they need help because, you know, they're vulnerable and we want to try to see which kittens can actually become domesticated through this. But there's larger issues here of just letting these feral cats out. To me, it seems like a public health hazard if there is a cat with illness, like kitty leukemia that can spread fast. Stuff like that, it just seems like we would want to bring those cats in and try to do something with them. 4 weeks of trauma is a lot different than dying because you're, you know, feeding your babies outside and a predator comes. I mean, to me, you know, it just seems like there's a lot more issues related to this. And everyone in this room, they don't trust what's happening from your guys' end. So I think that there needs to be some relationship building and some trust, because I think we're all kind of on the same page in many ways. We're just, you know, we actually agree on a lot more than we disagree on, but we're not there yet. And I think that you guys maybe you need to step back. Like some of this, I even thought was condescending, and I'm not one of the people who does that work. But I was like, wow. And at the end of the day, you guys need to just think about it from a community perspective. Put yourself in a community-centered approach. And I'm not saying that's not how you guys are all the time, because you're public servants in my mind. And the work you're doing is so imperative. But if you lose the distrust from the community, the people that are supporting you, then this is why we have this. You know, it goes back to saying, wait, maybe we don't have the data to roll this policy. Maybe we should go back to our old policy, bring people in, get the right data together. And that's how public policy is. That's how it is in probably every other office in here. You look at the data across time. If we don't have good data, we need more time to gather the data. We don't just roll through because we have some qualitative information that we don't really like. So that's the part that I kind of, you know, I'm feeling the frustration in this room because the relationship isn't there and the trust. So.
Because they fire the people that.
Please, would you like to respond, Dr.
I mean, the presentation was meant for the commissioners. That's why I say it was redone a little bit because I know not everybody has a sheltering background, so I backed it way up. It was not meant to be for the folks that know this already. It was more to be basic information for people that have not been in that experience before. So, yeah.
I have a couple questions. One of them dovetails on what Commissioner Reese was saying. Given, you know, the problems with the timing of the rollout and not involving the community, you know, would you consider delaying and just maintaining the policy as it was until everyone can be involved and the statistics can be gathered and studied? And secondly, you know, I do hear that there is a problem as far as how the cat families do in the shelter, at least anecdotally. But it seems from the foster volunteers that they're not doing poorly in the foster homes, at least anecdotally. So could one small change to address that problem be allow the foster volunteers to take on that piece completely with support from ACC and SPCA so that, you know, the ones you mentioned may not be so skilled can become skilled, and take on that piece and then have support for the pieces that the shelters can take on properly?
So I think, again, we will still have cats that will need our help, that will need to come in, and that's what our foster program is for. And not, again, with a well-matched person who's experienced in it. I mean, ACC does not have the bandwidth to take on a feral cat nursery and foster program, and that's not what we want to do. I think, we do have a very robust foster program, but again, it's not necessarily the number of homes that we have, and we certainly have people willing to do it. It's the other piece of, once their cats are in the shelter system, there's a lot of other work and time and resources that go into it beyond the fostering as well. So we have to look at the whole picture and the numbers on the whole, as far as what we hope to achieve for that group. Does that make sense?
Right, that makes sense. I guess just to kind of hone in on the question, can the foster piece of it be left up to the volunteers to do in their homes, where the cat families seem to be less stressed out, instead of bringing them into the shelter?
I mean, there's certainly a number of people that trap and keep the cats and kittens in their home and don't bring them into the shelter until they're old enough. They're not ACC or SPCA cats at that point. I have no problem with them doing that on their own. The issue becomes, once they are impounded in the shelter, then it triggers that whole pathway piece. And again, all the rest of it that goes with it, with the staff and the care and all those kind of things. Even though they're spending some of their time in the foster home, they're coming back to the shelter, and we still have all the other services that we need and want to do. So I have no issue with trappers or rescue groups doing that work. It's just once they come into the shelter, it's a change. It's it's different for us.
Right. And to do that work, though, they still need the support of the shelters to call them when someone from the public calls in and says, there's a cat family in the backyard, can someone help? My understanding is the policy as it was to call on volunteers, and now that's changed, right?
No, that's still happening. And the idea is, again, with the kind of coalition of trappers, is to get everybody on the same page, everybody has the same information, and we draw from the same pool.
My understanding is the rescue groups are separate from your own volunteers.
We cannot have an outburst during the meeting, I'm sorry. I cannot repeat this again. We don't want to be here all night. So if the audience would please be quiet, we can get through. As I said, the commissioners have questions. This is an action item. The commission must decide if we're going to take action on this item, and to do so, we must have some clarification. So please, stay quiet and allow us to continue our discussion. Did you want to say something, Dr. Valdez?
I didn't, just to, thank you. Just to reiterate, we are still actively involving trappers. An email went out this afternoon with information or a request to help cats and public cats. So just to clarify, that is still happening.
Okay, and I guess just to make the clarification that I think I'm hearing, and it's probably my misunderstanding, your volunteers are separate from the rescue groups that are here tonight?
Yeah.
So the calls are not going to the rescue groups any longer?
That's right.
Under the new policy? They never were?
Did, no. We had a group of volunteer trappers that we worked with. Yeah.
So it becomes, it's one of those things where a lot of people wear different hats, right? So all of us kind of work in different areas, and they wear a different hat even though we're the same person. So there is a lot of overlap with people that volunteer and are also run their rescue group. And those are two separate things. Anything that comes in is kind of vetted for foster as well. So there are some animals that we would not send to foster. I mean, it's something that we have to kind of look at first to say, is it a foster candidate or is it not? So it's not just as, if it's coming to the shelter, calling the trapper and then having it come in, we still need to look at that to see, is it even a foster candidate or is it not? It's the same thing when we get to kittens. I mean, we always screen them first to figure out if they're going to be okay to go or not. So that's still happening. Like when we do have these families go to foster, they're still being screened first and given the green light before they go out. They don't just, it used to be that way where they would kind of bypass the staff looking at them, and then we certainly had problems with sick or injured things going out, it wasn't caught, and they just went straight to foster, and then when we see them back, then there's issues. So, we try to get ahead of that, like as soon as they come in, we're like, okay, which pathway are we on here, and make the best decision that we can. So it's the same thing with the calling in, I have a mom with kittens, okay, let's take a step back, let's have a conversation, let's see if we need to call, do we need to call somebody to go out and assess it? What's the end goal? Is it just talking about it? Do they need to try? Some of that is going to be just so it's consistent, because it hasn't been. You may call ACC and get one piece of information, and this was part of the problem. This is why we're trying to communicate, because whatever's going on in Community Cat, I didn't necessarily know about until recently. And same thing, like what are you seeing at ACC? Well, here's what's happening here. And so now it's a lot more transparent and trying to, again, pool the resources and share all that information so that we have a sense of what's going on. But those are kind of two separate entities. And we certainly work with them, but it's one of those things like, we offer a cat to rescue because it fits their criteria and it doesn't fit ours, and they have the opportunity to accept it or decline it, which is fine. And then we just kind of, move on to the next ideal placement for that animal. But then once it's in their care, then it's in their care, and then it's their responsibility. So that's the piece to us. Like once they're in our care, and we're responsible for, getting them to their endpoint. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioners, are there further questions?
Well, I have a question then. Who's responsible for the kittens that are outside? Isn't that, who is responsible for the feral cat community and its well-being and its livelihood?
We're not going to touch every cat. I can only count the cats that we see that come in. I don't have any information on how many there are, or do we miss them. Hopefully if we keep track of the calls, we'll maybe have some idea if we're missing them or catching them, but no one knows that answer. Unless they come in, we can't count them or measure. What we can say is generally overall, since TNR has been in place, the number of cats impounded at both shelters have gone down. So, and TNR numbers have gone down. So that information we have. But, I still see pregnant cats come in, so some of them certainly grow up into adulthood and support pregnancy before we see them. And we certainly get older kittens too.
I am worried about this window of opportunity that's going to close, and with the animals that are out there. You miss the opportunity to spay them off. You miss the opportunity to capture the kittens who are now running wild. That's why I keep asking and pressing on. Are you watching that population? Are you watching those numbers? Because what gets
as best that we can, right? Because if we don't see it, we can't count it. Again, we can make a general trend as it's going down, and they're seeing less having to go through TNR. But of course, every season there's ones who miss because they come in as adults, as intact male cats or pregnant queens. We're not going to get them all, but the idea is with TNR and it being relatively stable and going down a little bit, that we have a relatively stable population, but we're not going to be able to put hands on all of them at the perfect time like their cats. It's just not the way that they operate under the best of circumstances. So again, it would be great if the feral cat population was zero, but it's not obviously a realistic thing. There's going to be some that don't get TNR right at the perfect time. But for the ones we know about, for the ones that we can count, those are the ones that we're trying to do the best that we can for.
But the study isn't balanced if you're not measuring both of those things. So you have to look at what success is for the program you want to put in place and what failure looks like if that program is being compromised in another area. And so I think the impact of this policy isn't being fully pulled through to the longer outcome of the feral cat population. And so if you do, for the peace of mind and including the stakeholders, what actually is our ultimate goal? Where are we going to get to with this? How do we know when we're doing well? How can you help us? How can we use you in the field, in our shelter, in your homes, to make sure that we continue the downward trend of the feral cat population?
So it's something we're going to try, and we will need to make adjustments. But there's no way to do a controlled study of cats that come in and cats that don't come in. There's no don't come in piece. Like, we don't see them, we can't count them. We can make a guess, again, based on, and this is the best that we can do. There's not going to be perfect data on this regardless. So there's not going to be an either or. They come in, they don't come in, because there's no counting that don't come in. It's an impossibility. So again, I mean, what we want to do is the best care that we can for the ones that we do see, and try to manage the intake so that it's a balance of making the best outcome that we can. That's where we're starting. So there's a lot of work to be done, and moving forward, this will start to collect it a little bit better and look at all these things. This is the first time we've had this conversation.
Very quickly, hopefully, two questions that can help move this conversation go forward, move things forward. I guess really kind of the thing that I want to see, obviously this is a work in progress, it seems like. I just wondering and hoping that we can get some sort of commitment from you that going forward that you will bring in and work with the rescue community, people from the rescue community who have obvious stakehold in this and are people that you rely on to make your operation work successfully. If you will commit to bringing them in and having them work on this policy with you.
I feel like we both do a good job of working with our rescue groups. I feel
They
like,
don't seem to be giving
I'm not
that.
saying on this topic, I'm saying in general, like when we need their help and we're offering them animals. That's how that works. I mean, with this population that we're talking about, like the feral queens and kittens, again, there's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that the shelter staff and the administration and everybody else after talking about this feel like is not the way we want to go. So we're going to change it, and if it's not working, we'll change it again. Like it's something that's fluid.
I can appreciate that.
Yeah,
All I'm asking
of
is
course.
for your commitment and understanding that you are relying on this group of people here to make that policy exist and work functionally.
Correct.
And I'm just, I guess, wanting some sort of guarantee, acknowledgement that they are going to be part of that decision that they're going to have to deal with. They're going to have to perform whatever policy that you put into place. They're going to have to adapt to that because they're not going to stop rescuing cats and working with us no matter what. So they're going to have to adapt to you. They're clearly seem to be, and you're readily admit this, that they have expertise. They have experience in the field, that they know what they're doing. So it seems illogical not to include them in these processes.
So I know from our perspective, we have engaged volunteers, and engaging and getting input is not necessarily the same as agreeing with the input.
I can appreciate that.
So, this is an ongoing process, and this is something that we've actively engaged our trappers in at least on 3 different occasions. So again, I'd like to say we have engaged them. Just because we don't necessarily adopt a policy doesn't mean they haven't been heard, and they've had opportunities to be heard. And we value them. I mean, I hope that's apparent. We very much value them. Again, we can agree to disagree, but they have been heard, and we can continue to hear them.
Okay, one very quick last question. You're building a new ACC shelter. Do you have plans to have this as part of a expanded feral kitten colony, queen and baby colony in your new multi-million-dollar shelter?
No, we have no plans for
Oh.
We will continue to use foster for the kittens. We don't have any plans at this point to use space for an in-shelter.
Shame on you.
Just to be clear, the ACC did not host that in the past, it was the SPCA, is that right, Dr.
Right.
Willett? Right, so that's not a change in policy.
No, we've never
Right.
had that.
In order to accommodate that, we would be talking about an expansion of a program, right? So the status quo will continue at the new shelter as it pertains to the feral cat or community cat program. Okay, got it.
Yeah, there is an area that's separate, like we have now, that's separate for the feral cats in general that come in. But specifically a nursery program is not something that we've looked into now.
I know that this policy has changed obviously and is still a work in progress. I think one thing when considering changes or things to add or things like that that hasn't been answered here tonight is what does success look like? What is, if this policy is successful, what does that mean? What has changed other than the cats aren't coming in? I guess you've asked that a couple times too. I think that would be, is it saving more cats? Is it, what does that mean for the shelter?
Yeah.
I think having it clearly defined would add a lot of value.
Yeah, I think it's not just one metric, but I think starting with a baseline, just measuring, what constitutes a feral cat when it comes in, and keeping better numbers on exactly that population, whereas before we counted in a lot of other ways.
I guess I mean like in changing this policy
right.
from what it used to be, from policy A to this new policy B, what does, because you're testing this, right? So policy B, if policy B is successful, what's that metric?
Right, so I think we look at, time in foster, length of stay, wait for service, those kinds of things to see we can move this population through quicker, and then what their outcome.
And mortality rates,
Correct.
We can expect some better.
Right, and the other thing that I know, at least in my shelter, we're not good at counting is the illness. And so pulling that out, there's not really a box that just checks, yes, this kitten was sick, but I think, you have to look at it carefully to say who's staying longer, and certainly see, who's had medications or things like that, because that does make a big difference in what they look like when they're in our care. A lot of foster kittens have, multiple vet appointments, and they do have to come back really often just for routine things, but a lot of them get sick with fluoride, diarrhea, we deal with that, that's fine. But it's a lot of work for the medical staff to keep up with all of that, and then treating the ones in-house, keeping tabs of the ones out-of-house.
That can also be a measure of success, that
right.
You're able to care for the
exactly.
within your
and
population.
Exactly, and so the work that both of us have tried to do on the overall capacity for what we can care for, more in the shelter just leads to more illness, which leads to longer length of stay. It was not uncommon that I would have a room full of 20 cats that needed medication every morning that had URI. And once it starts, then it just kind of, if you have a crowded shelter, it just spreads like wildfire. So part of this, again, is trying to manage the intake as we can so that we don't want them to be sick in our care. It's just a reality of animals in the shelter. It goes for dogs too. And then it just, then it's that much work on top of just the routine. So if we can try to keep it under control as best we can, we'll get odd things. We'll get an impound of 40 at one time that we're not anticipating, and then we have to be able to flex with that. So we can't control our intake, but the pieces that we can, we'll try to. It's similar to what we're trying with the foster kittens. They're out in foster, they're coming back a little younger, we're spayed and neuter a little bit younger, they go to the adoption floor and get adopted much more quickly. We're keeping them in foster and returning them when they've got spay and neuter appointment. So as soon as they come in, they get their services, they go to the adoption floor. Previously, they were just kind of coming in, as soon as they hit weight. And we may get an influx of 20 one day and then none the next week, and they're waiting for spay and neuter. And guess what, while they're waiting, no one's looking at them to adopt them, and they're getting sick. and then they stay longer. So that's a population that we had some control over. So I'm like, okay, let's try it this year and see, can we do managed intake of the foster returns so that it's manageable and it's more even. The kids get out of here faster. So it's the same kind of concept in this little group, is to just weigh the difference. If we, again, if they don't need our help right then, support them until they're ready to come back and they do need our services, and we get everybody taken care of as quickly as possible. That's really the goal.
Commissioners, are there any further questions for the speakers? Okay, at this point, perhaps we should have mentioned this earlier, but just to clarify what this commission is, we are an advisory committee for the Board of Supervisors. We actually do not implement policy, so we probably should have said that at the beginning. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to discuss amongst the commissioners briefly, before we do some public comment, because I do want to hear and respect everyone's time. I would like to discuss amongst the commissioners what we think our plan of action could be, should be, or if there is any action required at all, given that we can't tell animal care and control what to do. SPCA is a private organization, we can't, they don't care what we say. So I'm wondering if we can sort of talk about if amongst the commissioners, do we agree that there is a policy problem? Is it a process problem? Is there no problem? And what might we be able to do about that? Does anyone have any suggestions?
I do want to clarify one thing. I think if it's a partnership policy, it should be treated as, you're in agreement that you'll work together with the commission as you are trying to do this together jointly. Meaning that even though we don't have any jurisdiction over or can't advise the SPCA, if your goal is cooperation with ACC, we're here to, we're hoping that you'll listen to our recommendations or our action as well.
Again, we can't make any recommendations.
No, we can't make any
But we can
recommendations,
recommend
but we
to
can.
the board of supervisors.
Yes.
Right.
And so to that end, commissioners, I ask you, do we think that there is something actionable here? And if so, what might that be? What might that look like?
I think, in my opinion, the most actionable point here was brought up when sort of agreed that there isn't anybody managing community cats right now. I mean, ACC can do a wonderful job of managing their shelter. SPCA can do a wonderful job of managing their shelter. Our volunteers here can do a wonderful job of managing their cats, but nobody is bringing all of the functional pieces of the machine together to work properly. I think that we've seen people working with dogs a lot more coordinated fashion because the laws require that. With cats, because we don't have laws governing the way that they're brought in and the way that they're readopted out to the community. We're in an area where I think we have to build policy if we're going to get to a better place than we are now. And I also think that we have to all be collecting the same type of data because we're making decisions right now made on a lot of assumptions and opinions, but we don't have anything hardcore to go on.
So to that end,
I agree. We could make some at least recommendations or statements of support saying, maybe people should go back and gather the right data over time. Make a more informed decision. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people in here. I heard multiple times from the SPCA and the ACC representatives that they have spoken to volunteers, they've heard from volunteers, but those people in the audience don't feel heard. We can see that. That's very apparent. So I think that that's also a major recommendation is set up a town hall. There's tons of free spaces. Go use the public library. There just needs to be a better way to engage the community out here and have real data. When I see 45%, stuff like that really bothers me because it feels like politics over policy. It does to me because 45% that's an illusion. What does that mean? Out of what number? I would really feel like a lot better if more data was brought into begin with, you know? How many people, and even on this side, even the volunteers end, how many cats, feral cats, queens are right now? How many kittens are in your guys' community? On both ends, people need to be taking a lot better data, and I'm just putting that out there. And we can streamline that. What kind of systems are you using to gather this data to begin with? To me, that's an issue. We can make, you know, recommendations on ways to have better methodology across the board.
I think also, as Commissioner Van Horn mentioned, like if there is a void in our local law as far as, you know, how cats should be treated or community cats, then that's definitely something that we can discuss and study and eventually make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to, you know, change the laws or add laws so that this is not, you know, just a mystery.
Well, and as Dr. O'Neill pointed out, when we talk about community cats, that encompasses all sorts of cats, everything from the feral that's never seen a human to, you know, little kitty who got away, right? So that also plays into the question of the data and how we make informed decisions about this community. I didn't think about it, I wasn't prepared. I haven't gone through the civil code, or the city charter. I have not looked at what ordinances pertain to cats. Has anyone done that? It didn't, I apologize, I probably should have, but it didn't even occur to me until now. But it sounds like we don't even know what a cat, how the city defines a cat. And as you say, we've got all sorts of laws around dogs. It sounds like maybe that's the first step. Talk about how the city defines a community cat, or if the city defines a feral cat. If the city defines a feral cat, what is our obligation to the welfare of that animal? Does anyone know on the commission? Do we have any?
I don't think there's nothing specific about feral cats. I mean, they're treated a little bit differently than just a stray.
Right.
As far as, you know, we can move forward with them. I mean, typically if they come over the counter, we may hold them for a day or two, you know, let them acclimate, actually see truly feral or not, and then we can move them along quickly. If we can send them straight to a community cat or TNR. We're not bound by the holding period, which is great. So we're not holding them any longer than we need to. But sometimes it is hard to tell. I mean, a cat in a trap is going to be an angry cat. Right? You know, give it some time to acclimate and truly assess what's going on there, and then, you know, kind of figure out which pathway they need to go to. But there's not, it's not exactly wildlife, but it's not exactly the other piece either. There's much more structure around the dogs.
Right.
And then, you know, that's a statewide thing.
I can certainly look into some of the city laws between now and the next meeting, but I can say in general, the state of California has looked at cats essentially as wildlife, with laws put into place that make them make a number of exceptions for them from other things that you find in the wild, like you can't eat cats, you can't sell parts of them, you know, to make pelts or fur out of. But largely, the state of California looks at them as wildlife. So we'd be looking probably, as San Francisco often does, at being at the forefront of policy if we were to look at an exploratory sort of way of bringing all the interested parts, or all our interested parties, to a place where we could make some policy going forward.
Yeah, I second that. I see this as an opportunity really to push a more progressive policy, or look at the feral cat community and what our moral obligation and civic responsibility is to care for this population.
Right. Well, it's to Dr. O'Neill's point. They don't track animals that they don't have come in. So, you know, it's sort of a catch-22 here. If you want to talk about outcomes, but the animal is never documented, and it's very hard to track the outcomes. So it's going to be very hard. To your point, Bunny, is how do we know that we're being successful? So in order to really track this, obviously we need more numbers, but it sounds like we need more definition around what these animals are, how do we define them, and also what is our responsibility. I mean, the Animal Care and Control is a taxpayer-funded entity, and reports to the city administrator, and the Board of Supervisors, of course, has say in some of their policy. But again, if we back up and say, as an advisory committee, what would we ask of the Board of Commission, the Board of Supervisors, what would we ask them at this point? I personally haven't, other than to ask them to reverse the policy or to intervene in some way. We could certainly send a letter of support or something along those lines, as you say. But I feel like this is a bigger issue than that. So what say you, fellow commissioners?
I think, at least for me, whether it's a policy issue is still a question mark until there's more data, but there's definitely a process issue here. So maybe a recommendation can be made as far as, for this policy change or any future policy changes, there has to be some protocol that involves everybody.
Well, certainly as a commission, we can always request that Animal Care and Control, in partnership with the SPCA, if they intend to make some sort of policy change, that we could ask them present it to the commission first, in the interest of the public information. I don't know that we could force anything like that. We don't want to meddle with too much. I don't know how applicable that is, but that's one suggestion. Jane?
I don't know. I'm sorry to say that. I feel like I'm disappointing everybody in the room, but I wish that this is sort of new for us to figure out how do we work our way through this. It seems as though we're acting as mediators tonight rather than as
problem solvers.
Yeah, I don't know if we can particularly solve your problem other than the problem seems to be solved within 3 known communities right now. The SPCA, ACC, and the stakeholders that are out there are advocates, are soldiers on the ground dealing with the cat populations out there. What, from ACC's point of view, you've listened to all of this tonight, Dr. O'Neill, what would you change? What would you have done differently this time around, or if knowing where we are now, what would you have done differently to not be here in this situation?
Well, again, this is not the ideal venue, I think, for dealing with this. I think you're exactly, I think you're right in that you've seen, what is the commission's role in all of this? Or, at this point, is there a mediation between the 3 groups? Honestly, I am not the be-all, end-all of policy making. This was a group discussion, still is a work in progress. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to try some new things. And then the way that it was communicated or not communicated, piecemeal or otherwise, led us to where we are now. So, it's not ideal. It would have, again, looking back, I don't know that we could have changed anything different because that was not a discussion that we were at a point ready to have. It was, our hand was kind of forced to respond, and we have had a number of conversations, office hours, talks, either at our place or across the street as well. So I feel like we've given opportunity for people to come and be heard. So again, looking back, it was something that got way ahead of where we were ready to have the conversation. And now it's still a work in progress, getting the details.
Well, on that note,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was just going to say probably the exact same thing. You would say maybe there are 40 people sitting here waiting for 2 hours to tell us exactly what they want us to do. Maybe we should listen to them.
So at this point, we would like to open the conversation to public comment, and we will have a 2-minute limit on the time. We'll set a timer. So please adhere to that. We appreciate that you've been here a while and have a lot to say. We appreciate your patience and passion. So if you would, sir, would you like to begin?
I only have a very little bit to say. As a scientist, the way to measure success of this program is to count the number of feral cats that are out there.
Can you say your first and last name?
I'm Dr. Mark Lemire. What needs to be done is like what the birders do. They go out and they count how many birds there are of each species. What needs to be done is to go out and count the number of feral cats that are out there. And with this new program, if you don't catch them early, the feral cat population is going to explode. That's all I really have to say. I have a sick cat at home, and that's why I rushed up here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Arlene Seen, and I've been a cat rescuer, tamed feral cats. I've been done humane trapping, and I've gotten wonderful adoptions for the cats that I've rescued. My two things. I thank you for the note of the condescension of the two agencies and the doctor who was their consultant, who said, thank you for someone noting that there was condescension towards the cat rescuers here. I'd like to say that there are hundreds, if not possibly thousands of cat rescues in this city. There's dozens of organizations. There are people like my neighbors who don't even belong to a group. For a long time I did cat rescuing on my own, then I got involved with Pets and Pals. I also pay taxes for ACC, and I expect them to be accountable to me not only as a cat rescuer, but also because I pay taxes, and I don't know how much of my taxes, if any, go to the SPCA. I know they have a lot of donors. And I'd like to tell you a story about what leaving kittens out too long can do. The first time I ever rescued a family of cats, we realized the cat was pregnant. She suddenly gave birth, and my doctor told me to bring in those cats as soon as possible. My doctor, and he's a doctor with like decades of experience, and I didn't listen. I thought, oh, they're so little, they're still nursing. About a week or 2 weeks later, the cats disappeared because mother cats move their kittens. It's not a question of, well, maybe they'll move them. They almost all do this, and I've spoken to many people about this. They're going to hide the kittens to protect them. So mercifully, through peeking into different things, we discovered the cats in the garage. We got someone to let us in. By this point, they were several weeks old. They were running around like crazy.
2 minutes.
That's it. So don't do it. Do not leave them out, and respect the. Let the cat rescuers know when there are feral cats around, kittens around. Let them know, basically. Just.
My name's Fani Avnakidis, and I'm reading a statement on behalf of Elva Granat. She's a lot more comfortable talking to cats than humans, so I'll do this for her. She says, contrary to claims that the queens are experiencing unacceptable stress levels, she has witnessed even wary queens accept food dishes placed under their chins. They remain in place nursing and are at ease once they are left alone. The vast majority are able to nurse and care for their kittens in a quiet place in the shelter. The general public believes that when they call SPCA and ACC, these two major institutions will be the first responders for animals that are in danger. But these expectations will be thwarted because the public is now told to leave the mamas and their nursing kittens out in the wild to survive on their own. Much of the general public will not have time or knowledge and may not be able to do anything other than make that one life-saving call for assistance. Under these policy changes, San Francisco had been a trailblazing example for other cities grappling with overwhelming numbers of feral cats. San Francisco should expand the numbers of trappers, fosters, and volunteers who have been working as an effective team with ACC and SPCA for the last 20 years so that we can humanely diminish our feral cat population even further. Otherwise, young feral kittens will remain feral, and along with those mothers, they will procreate San Francisco back into one of those cities desperately embracing a less humane hands-off approach to dealing with our feral cat populations. Please reverse this policy change. Let the public contact trappers. Let these vulnerable animals be temporarily and humanely sheltered through foster care. Give young feral kittens a chance to be socialized and adopted into happy homes during the critical time period of socialization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nadine May, I paid my dues and trapped probably 250 feral cats and kittens. So I want to actually counter some of the statements that have been made here. First of all, how do you get to 0% feral cats when people abandon their cats? Last week I found one, he's a perfectly friendly guy. He was out there unfixed in the bushes. So you need to educate people. Secondly, San Francisco has been doing this for 30 years, not 20 years, but 30 years. Some of the people who started in Golden Gate Park started in the 80s. And the number of cats in the park has gone down from hundreds to approximately 5. So if that isn't pretty close to 0, I don't know what is. I need to talk about the statistics very briefly on the Mamas on the Street program, because they're talking about 45% mortality. Actually, out of the 4 years that they had the nursery, there were 85 moms, no one died. There were 301 kittens, 5 died. That comes out to a less than 2% mortality rate. 2%. I'm not asking SPCA to bring back their nursery. If people there don't feel comfortable, like previous staff did, taking care of ferals, then they shouldn't be asked to take care of ferals. And lastly, I'll just say one thing. I was called on a trapping situation years ago. We had to crawl under the porch to find the kittens. The person who called it only seen them once, and all she said was, "They're kittens." We didn't know how old they were. I crawled under the porch to find the kittens and found them both about 3.5 weeks old, with their eyes full of mucus, almost shut. We got both of them out of there, and the second one did not respond to antibiotics. Why? Because there was a foxtail in the back of its eye. And that's what SPCA might say was an innocuous situation for moms and ferals. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Annalise, and since 81, I've been taking
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Is that better? Yes. Ever since 1981, I have been taking care of mammals and kittens for the SPCA and the ACC. I have never had a cat kill the kittens or dry out. And I never even had one kitten die for that kid. So I think the book of works fine if everybody cooperates.
Thank you.
One more. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Deborah Gradian, and from about 1997 until the last of the night-fed cats under the SPCA's LTNR program in Golden Gate Park died, or the last one was actually brought up to the aging shelter. My husband and I were in Golden Gate Park every night. Every night. We live right outside of it. We worked with Paula Katafis, we worked with Rocky, we worked with Kate Brown, and the goal of that was to stabilize that population. Coyotes showed up, and I think many of us have had the experience of going into the park at night and finding, a queen that had been slowly socializing and coming out to eat what my husband would call it a 3-foot cat, because that's how close they would come, with bits of fur where there had been a cat, because a coyote had come by, or a pack of marauding raccoons. So the idea that, well, they're safer where they are. I'm sorry, I call BS on that. They're not always safer where they are. Coyotes are not safe companions for newborn kittens. In point of fact, neither are marauding raccoons. People who let their dogs run off leash in Golden Gate Park, it's because nobody's watching. We did this for a long time. We subsidized it out of our own pockets. I need to get home and feed my 3 elderly rescues, who were all, one of them in fact, We picked up on the path on the way home from Safeway up to Beach Golden Gate Park, and I had to charge the coyote in the bushes, growling at it to get it to back off while we picked him up. His name was Rio. He was not feral. He was not a community cat. He got out a window while his person was out of town on business. And had he been there 30 seconds longer, he would have been a protein supplement. Unacceptable. Guys need to pay more attention. By the way, they are not wild animals. That metric is based on bobcats, not house cats. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi there, nice to see you again. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thank you to all who are present, which demonstrates your concern and advocacy of the nursing moms, newborns issue. As mentioned, the new policy is to leave the mom nursing kittens in the location they're found for at least 4 weeks, so mom can wean them with little or no stress at all. I am Janet Cunningham, a longtime dedicated volunteer in the area of rescue for over 23 years for the San Francisco SPCA. I am a retired middle school teacher who taught in San Francisco, this wonderful school district, for 24 years, and brought humane education into my classrooms based on kindness, compassion, humanity, respect and self-respect for all. I currently manage and feed 25 plus colonies every day, from San Francisco to South City to San Bruno, ensuring all cats I've rescued have fresh food, water, flea and medical treatment when necessary. I recently rescued 3 nursing moms, their kittens. The tagline from the Community Cats program reads, quote, saving and protecting animals, providing care and treatment and advocacy for their welfare, and enhancing the human-animal bond. Unfortunately, it appears as though this mission statement from CCP has been lost in translation with the current situation at hand. My purpose in speaking today is not about statistics or studies or perceptions of nursing moms and kittens in the shelter. My purpose is to focus on kindness, compassion, humanity, and advocacy for all who do not have a voice. All animals, but especially the cats and kittens and newborns that are under the siege and the new policy of leaving them out there for over 4 weeks until they're weaned, until the rescuers can go rescue them. I want to end on this statement. I was told not to speak tonight. I was told that if I wanted to speak, I should do so in private. I was censored. I was also told that it's a waste of time for us to come here and speak with you because you have no jurisdiction or oversight on the SPCA or animal care and control. That's what I was told, and I choose not to be censored, and I choose to say from my heart, compassion, humanity is key. And remember, when we do not speak up for those who are being bullied or oppressed, we are just as shamefully guilty for those who are committing the offense. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do appreciate that everyone has come, so I am glad that everyone's here. It's nice seeing the community out for whatever reason, so thank you.
My name is Susan Wheeler. I was a member of the feral cat team from 2001 to 2014 when I left rather abruptly after something really dreadful from my point of view. And certainly the cats I was caring for point of view happened. That's not what I'm here to read a letter from a wonderful couple who did kitten fostering, well, kitten and queen fostering. So this is from Lisa and Chris Ennis. My husband and I have been working with the feral cats of San Francisco since the cat assistance team was created in the early 1990s. And my volunteer efforts with the SPCA go back earlier. Our specialty until 2013 was when we stopped fostering, was caring for feral moms with unweaned kittens. We'd like to disagree with at least 3 points in the letter this was the letter that Virginia sent out. First, we could not have done this job for so long if we thought the moms were under stress. On the contrary, they were calm and we were always under the impression they appreciated our help. They were fed and kept warm, clean, dry, with significantly less effort than if they had been outside. While we usually could not interact with the moms, they let us play with their kittens, who we would joke practically socialize themselves. Second, by attempting to delay their intake by just a few weeks, you think it will just be as easy to humanely trap everyone, and two, socialization will be
Thank you.
easy.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, I want to end up saying that they're extremely disappointed to hear of the proposed policy change. It will only mean more feral cats, both neutered and unneutered, out in the streets.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Helena Barecki. I want to clear up a couple of things. One is that it at least has previously been a policy that kittens are on the adoption floor before they are spayed and neutered, and priority is taken if somebody wants to adopt that particular kitten to spay and neuter them first. Secondly, regarding capacity for care, if we are going to keep a true TNR program working, all of those cats still have to come in. All of those cats still have to be spayed and neutered, and all of those cats still have to get their shots, rabies in particular. I want to say that the foster program, Tony's Kitty Rescue, does have capacity, and I really hope that Dr. O'Neill and her cooperation with the SPCA really reaches out to Tony and finds out how that can work best. Because we have the capacity for care, the time for ACC to alert volunteer trappers where to go is when the Good Samaritan first calls, independent of the age of the kittens. People go on business trips, vacation, or are otherwise indisposed to deal with an agency that does nothing the first time they reach out. Like, if the kittens disperse, the Bonham kittens, if they survive, they may procreate again before the TNR team locates them. Secondly, I'd like to point out that I'd like the ACC in particular, where I volunteer, to work and listen to the orange volunteers when we say, hey, this cat is not displaying their feral behaviors. When we go in, we're not rushed. I understand that that's rushed. That makes perfect sense. But hey, this cat's acting like an indoor cat. I would hope the ACC can partner with the volunteers in that. And then thirdly, public health issue regarding toxoplasmosis. It's not spread by adult ferals because they only excrete oocysts the first time they are exposed. So adult ferals don't, but kittens or previously indoor adults will. So I also would like to put these in the public record. Some of these, this is my statement, and others are letters that other people have sent to me.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Colomello. I'm not a cat rescuer, I'm just a cat mom. So I have great respect and admiration for the rescuers here, and also for the ACC and the SPCA. But I am here to speak against the policy change regarding kittens. My own cat may never have made it to adoption if this policy were in place. My cat and her 4 siblings were fostered at a very young age, prior to 2 months old. Not only were they protected from all the dangers of life on the streets, but they were socialized at a critical period of life, which made them dramatically more adoptable. and they were much more likely to have long lives as loved family members. Our cat walked into our home of 2, now 3 dogs, and 2 humans about 5 months old. She was and is confident and happy. She fit right into our little family. This was no accident. She had been socialized with people and dogs due to her time in a foster home. All of her siblings were adopted. None of the studies address the very specific situation here in San Francisco. Feral cats and their kittens need not end up in the general shelter population, which is no doubt stressful and could lead to bad outcomes. Let trappers continue to trap cats and their kittens of all ages and allow them to be raised in foster homes. Give them the opportunity that my cat and so many others have had. There seems to be no question that this works, so the only question is why we would even consider not doing it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Henny Martin. I've been doing TNR here in San Francisco since 2003. I've trapped over 166 cats for the city of San Francisco. I wanted to address about the wildlife and if feral cats are considered wildlife. They are not. According to California Agricultural Code, they are protected under California Penal Code 597B, if you want to look that up. And under that 597B, you can actually be jailed or fined if someone prevents you from feeding ferals, or if you stop feeding ferals that you've already started. It comes under cruelty.
Is this willful and abandonment?
I'm not sure exactly on that, but you can look it up, 597B under California Penal Code. It falls under California Agricultural Code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Patricia Briggs, and I have done this type of work sort of unofficially with the SPCA for the past 15 years. I've done mainly recovery for about 40 cats. I have taken in many of these cats. So I think I know the behavior pretty well. I was concerned when, I know we're talking mainly about kittens tonight, and it's very impressive to hear how much caring and compassion there is for them. Another thing I heard which wasn't addressed was that the SPCA was discouraging people from feeding cats. I talked to Laura Birdsall, who was very nice. She said words to the effect that they found that feral cats do okay when they're not fed. Well, if they're not being fed, they're not being spayed or neutered. And why do you have cats, as Henny would say, dumpster diving, you know, going into dumpsters looking for food if they are not starving? Another problem here that we've not talked about is the source. We're talking about the end result, which is feral cats. The source of these cats is, we live in a safe, not a safe, but a fairly good area of the city. It's not a rich area, it's not a poor area, but in the past 15 years, we have literally taken in 10 cats, got them spayed and neutered. Not one of them was already spayed or neutered. So people are illegally abandoning them. And if you go in the Central Valley, like when we go to Yosemite, we take Amtrak, we get off the San Joaquin train, and then we go to Yosemite. There's sometimes a leeway between the train and the bus. I know one time I walked in Merced, I swear to God, I walked 6 blocks, and there were at least 10 cats starving, eating out of dumpsters. Their coats were dirty. They had creases in their coats, you know, they were sick, kittens with runny eyes. And people, the culture in the Central Valley, this is Modesto, Madera, Stockton, Turlock, Bakersfield, Fresno, literally, you know, you either leave your dog, and I'll finish quickly, you either leave your dog in the yard all day or you let them out on the street, unspayed or neutered. So the problem is prevention. We've got to stop all these cats from becoming feral. It's just criminal. So people have to suffer consequences for not spaying and neutering. That's the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Judy Roney.
Can't hear you.
How about now? My name is Judy Roney, and reading a statement.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The other mic is better.
Okay. I'm reading the statement from Linda Garrett, a longtime volunteer. She's out of town on business. She says, I'm out of state on business this week and regret that I cannot present this statement personally. I have asked a fellow volunteer to revisit my absence. I have been a kitten foster carer for the past 18 years and a trapper for the past 12. My biggest concern is that we are no longer being told when kittens have been found by residents, even though the new protocol is to tell residents to leave the kittens in the wild until they're weaned. I am not aware of any callbacks a month or two later. Either the kittens have died, the mom has moved them, or the resident has lost interest and no one knows where the kittens are. If ACC is actually doing what they say they're doing, volunteer trappers would have been getting calls starting in April to march kittens, and surely by May and June there would be dozens of calls to go out and try to trap the older weaned kittens and their mom. There have been in fact 0 calls under this particular protocol that I'm aware of. ACC is revealing the ignorance of the feral situation when they tell you that this is a better practice. When it comes to kittens born in the community, they have turned into a 100% kill shot. I'm sickened by their indifference to animal suffering. The so-called stress they say they observe at the shelter is something I've never seen in my home. They're obviously doing something wrong, and I would be happy to show them how to take care of a feral queen properly. My feral moms thrive in the quiet of my downstairs bathroom or extra bedroom. I implore the Commission not to let this issue be ignored. ACC staff is unwilling to answer simple questions. They refuse to tell us how many callbacks from residents they have gotten. If the Commission asked a simple question, perhaps they would respond. I think we all know the answer is 0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judy Wilson, and I am the president of Coastal Cat Rescue Group. I formed Coastal Cat Rescue Group because San Mateo County does not have the support that San Francisco had. San Francisco was one of the most fantastic groups that they had. When Audra and Erin were here, they actually would assist me. We fixed over 175 cats from farms and the Princeton area and along the coast with their support because we had no support in San Mateo County. I have made a lot of donations. I've had friends that have made donations. I work in San Francisco in a very prestigious law firm. I will not be making any more donations, and I will be telling others not to because of this change if it goes through. It is so important, that window to allow these kittens to be adopted. I currently have 4 moms, queens, with their kittens in different foster homes. From the day they came in, they have relaxed immensely, and they are all from farms. They were in fear when they came in, and now they're relaxed. So maybe this shelter environment isn't. The foster home is the best way to go with queens and their babies. I'm horrified at this change because all it's going to do is maybe make your numbers look better inside because the cats aren't coming into the shelter, but our streets, the numbers are going to look really bad. And the community will not be getting the support that it should. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Shi, and I've lived in San Francisco for almost 40 years. I initially just wanted to say I completely support the people who wrote the petition asking that the original program continue. And I still support that. But I also wanted to thank the commissioners who have suggested that maybe this whole issue should have some kind of very big debate of all the participants. which would be ASCC, SPCA, and all the good people here. Because there obviously is miscommunication, but a lot more as well. And there really needs to be complete, open communication between these two sides. And then maybe your commission could decide on what would be the best policy to help the situation. And I just want to quickly say that I honestly feel that some of the people, I mean, representing places like the ACC, I really honestly don't think you know what you're talking about. For example, saying that mother cats and babies, the situation when they are put together in ACC or some other place, foster place, is stressful for the moms. I don't see that at all, and I've had not nearly as many examples as these good people here, but I have done some, and taken care of a colony as well. So my experience, the moms and babies, if they're caught together, are kept together in a safe place. And the moms continue to care for the babies until they're ready to be separated. They can be, stop nursing. And then they are taken by people to be, rehabilitated, to be socialized for adoption. And at that time, the moms are spayed and returned to the wild. So there is no contradiction between those two efforts. So and that's the way we always did it. So I don't exactly know what the problem is.
Thank you for your comments.
So I really hope that
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Jones. I am a volunteer trapper with SPCA. I also foster through TKR, and I'm on the guiding coalition that was mentioned for community cats. That we did meet before all of this came out, and I was also told not to speak, but here I am. And I just want to say that when we had those meetings before the policy, before it came out, yes, they asked for our opinion, but they gave us no data. They gave us no numbers on why this was necessary. We asked how many kittens died. We asked how many moms died, how many got sick, and they gave us nothing. And so it was very frustrating because they couldn't give us any data, and we're supposed to be part of this coalition that's helping make decisions, but how can we do that if there's no data? And the other thing I just wanted to mention really quick is that in their presentation, that's my picture that I took. I trapped that mom and her 7 kittens, and that's a picture of her in the nursery at SPCA. And I sat there and took that picture. I picked up her kittens. She was not in a cage. She was in a condo. She had a whole room to herself. There were empty food bowls. She was clearly eating well. And when her kittens went off to foster, she got spayed, and I returned her, and she was very healthy. And all of the kittens survived, and they were all very healthy. And I know that's anecdotal, but seeing that picture just really made me want to say something.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't think I was going to come up here, but after hearing some of the things from veterinarians who should know better, I had to make a statement. First off, some of the percentages, the 45% number and all that, I mean, come on, that's totally bogus. What I do want to say is I'm a feeder. I'm not a trapper or a foster person. I'm one of the people that goes out there in all kinds of weather to make sure these cats eat. The assertion that letting feral cats go on their own and we don't need to feed them, that is, in a word, inhumane. These cats are used to being fed. These cats mostly have been abandoned. Many of them gotten rid of when they're no longer cuddly kittens. They're out on the streets. Many of them are friendly. As part of my job, not only do I feed them, but I make sure that the ones that I can touch get their monthly flea medication. I make sure that they are healthy. If you want an accurate count, Dr. O'Neill, of what's going on out in the street, ask these people. These people know. And one other observation I have to make, and I know that the committee is quite diverse, but since Dr. O'Neill is personally involved with the decision, the outcome of your decision, I feel she should recruit you.
Dr. O'Neill is no longer a voting member on the commission. She was a member of our commission before, but when she began work at Animal Care and Control, she no longer votes on the next program.
The city charter requires that we have a representative from the ACC and a practicing vet in the city. She used to be the practicing vet in the city, now she's the ACC representative. Dr. Van Horn is the practicing vet in the city.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Mink. I'm not a rescuer, though I have a house full of cats. I've had as many as 5. I want to bring up 2 examples of 2 of our cats, maybe 3. One is a kitten that was actually found, we adopted from SPCA, and it was a kitten that no doubt had wandered from its mother. She was about this big, luckily found by somebody, and it had the best outcome. Ended up in as SPCA, we found her at the Macy's window, which I'm now no longer able to go because I adopt all the animals I see, and lives with us still. Tiny bit anxious, and I suspect from living on the streets for however long she did. So we had a positive outcome there. We have a second cat who my husband trapped, and we would call him a straight feral, and he was, but he was dying. He had a huge abscess in his neck. It took 2 to 3 tries for my husband to get him, got him to care. He would not have survived. He would have died, and it wouldn't have been a quick death. It was the slow mass that was growing and eating him alive. He's still in our house. He's about 15. He's our most social cat, so it's not impossible to change. We've actually had 2 feral cats who've become our social cats. We just lost one. He was about 19. So it's not an impossible thing to actually change ferals. It's not the goal. Obviously, you need a special environment to do that. But I do feel like it feels a bit inhumane to make policy changes based on statistics that don't exist or data that doesn't exist. Medical professionals don't try different medications based on just feeling like they want to. You really need data to show something's not working, and when you don't have that, and actually it seems you have data that shows something is working. So I guess I'm not really sure why you would make a change without having an outcome that you're looking for when you have stuff that's actually working. So thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline, and I'm not a novice to this world of feral cats. I've always had cats. My name is Jacqueline, and I'm novice to this feral cat thing. I've always had cats, and they give me the joy of my life, my cats. And I got involved because I found a kitten in Knoxville, and it was one cat, and I didn't know what to do, so I called some agencies, Give Me Shelter and some other ones, and they told me what to do. Then a week later, there were 4 more. I kept that one cat because they said they were going to separate it because it couldn't be with other cats because of diseases. So I kept that one. But the next week, there were 4 more there. So I go, oh my God, I can't keep 4. So I called, and they said that ACC took them. And Tony Kittens took them, and they found homes. So it does work. DNR works. Rescuing works. And to leave these cats out there, I live in Clear Lake. My brother, I go to Clear Lake a lot. And there are cats roaming everywhere because there's no program. There are cats everywhere because there was just no program. So they have no money they're a poor city. They have no money to help them. And if we want to end up like them in 10 years, that's what's going to happen if we stop this program.
So it's important, this program, and to change it, just because they don't want to work. They wanted the easiest way to do the littlest work with all the $40 million they get from donations and from services, merchandise, and adoption. That's how much money they get a year. And they can't help these kittens on the street. And also, in an area in San Francisco, I was volunteer every Monday for feeding the cat, the feral cats. Then I found that there was kittens. I go, oh my God, there's kittens. There's one kitten, there's gotta be more kittens. Turned out there were 8 people who had storages. They left, the companies left, and they left these feral cats outside to fend for themselves. And we called them, SPCA did help them, trapped half of them. And we saved the kittens. Well, these 12 kittens were rehomed, so it does work. And to stop this program is ridiculous. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Hello, my name is Linda Willard. My concern is not calling the trappers right away. I'm a longtime trapper. Medical issues, I'm not currently, but I've trapped hundreds of cats. The logistics of San Francisco are challenging. The houses are together. When you go to trap, you've got to reach out to someone who's really not interested for the most part. They just want the cats gone. And you have to coordinate a time to crawl through their garage full of things, upstairs, down the back stairs, set up traps. After about an hour, they think you should be gone by now, and you're not. The 3 weeks can make all the difference in socializing a kitten versus a kitten going back out versus one of the failed adoptions or when they return the kittens because they never really, they were borderline to start with. So I think it's very important that the trappers are sent out right away. Whether we decide that the mothers, the queens should stay in the yard with the baby kittens, that's another fight. But I really think it's important somebody get out there, evaluate it, try to find out if you can trap those kittens and how you'll do it. Because it's really a challenge in the city. The logistics, there is no side entrances to most of the city. And most times I'm trapping, it's like, oh my Lord, And most of the trappers aren't young and healthy. Most of them are like me, old with bad knees and hiking the stuff up. So just a thought of don't hesitate to call right away. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carla Alvarez, and I don't work for any of the rescues. I'm just a concerned citizen, and I have to say that I admire what everybody does. I think that if everybody worked together, it would be better. And truthfully, the ACC and the SPCA have to recognize that their program works better because of all the people that are here. I think that they need to respect that, and I didn't see that here. I'm also concerned that I heard that there are volunteers and people who work that were told not to speak. I think that's unethical, and I think that needs to be looked into, because every single time that I've seen any kind of fraud or problems, the first thing that comes up is somebody says, you cannot talk about this, shouldn't talk about this, or not say anything. So I want to say that out of everything that I've heard today, I know everybody's working for the animals. I think if everybody worked together, it would be better. But to hear that people were told not to talk about whatever their concerns were, I think that's a bigger problem, and that should be addressed.
Hello, my name is Erica Baldwin. I'm not a cat rescuer, but I do have had cats all my life, and 2 of my 3 cats are feral, both from ACC, and I feel blessed to have them. One of my cats, you can tell she's slightly feral after you get to know her. She still acts up a little bit, but she's very super friendly. My concern is her mother's still out there unspayed and procreating and putting herself in danger, because I feel like every time the cats are out there and they're not caught, they're going to have multiple litters, which produces health problems for that one female cat. I have so many things on my mind, I'm sorry, but in short, I would like everyone to work together, and the ladies behind me, maybe develop a census and taking the census of the feral cats, so we can get really good statistics and numbers of what's working, what's not working, and I don't want to have a blame game going back and forth of who's not doing what, but if we all come together and work for the animals' common good, then they'll have quality lives. That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susie Grimley, and I just want to say that Trap-Neuter-Return does work. While I was living in San Carlos, our whole parking lot was filled with cats. We would have to go out in the morning and hit the cars. Otherwise, it was pretty nasty. So anyway, I just want to say that Trap-Neuter-Return does work. The trappers are wonderful. We didn't know what to do. And fortunately, we had a woman in our condo that came and trapped all the cats, got them spayed and neutered, released them. The kittens probably were maybe sent to 9 Lives. I was also a volunteer at 9 Lives. And I also was a volunteer at SPCA when they had the nursery, and it was wonderful. I loved it. And it's very important for kittens to be handled from 5 to 8 weeks so that they can be socialized. That's all I can say, but trap, neuter, and release does work. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Liza Chavez, and actually I've been doing rescue for the past 30 years. That was actually before San Francisco SPCA or Animal Kennel Control. It used to be run by Mr. Avancino. So I've done a lot of rescue, foster. I also did a lot of feeding colonies. And for the past 30 years, I can say that I do have experience with the mother cats and the kittens. And I think it's very important to get them out of whatever area they are as soon as possible, because that way the possibility of being tamed and finding a home is the best way to do it. Another thing that I see here, San Francisco SPCA, I mean, we do the work for the animal welfare, so we have to really look about what's the mission statement from San Francisco SPCA. And we have to continue with programs that are going to actually help the animal welfare. So it's very important to continue with the programs TNR and also the program for the not only the spaying and neutering, but the fostering and taking the cats out of the neighborhoods. I believe that San Francisco is actually a leading city for a better animal welfare. And I think we should set up an example for everybody else, not only in the San Francisco Bay Area, but outside of San Francisco, outside of the state. So we do have to really look at our mission statement and see how we want to change the animal welfare. How are we going to improve the animals, the life of the animals? We can't just run around, we can't just try to pass ordinances, killing or letting the animals just die or not feeding. That's not the answer. We have a responsibility because we domesticate those animals. So we do have responsibility for the dogs and the cats. And we cannot consider them wildlife. They're in a different state. But thank you so much for your time. And thank you for San Francisco SPCA.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment?
My name is Sylvia Ortiz, and I monitor a colony of over 125 cats for over 25 years. I didn't even know that the TNR program existed when I started doing this. We had a space on the waterfront dog patch. We still take care of those animals. There's a terrible problem going on there because there's a lot of development, as you well know. Everything, seagulls, raccoons, you name it, they're all there. They're displaced. They've lost their dens. Nobody cares. Fortunately for me, I've been able to, because of social media, been able to pressure the people out there at Forest to help us and to at least save their own asses and not look bad. So they're going along with allowing us to continue to feed, to do TNR. We had a big to-do last May when somebody just up and left affordable storage, Jackie referred to it, and those cats were left for us to clean up. I had to beg SPCA to allow me 5 cats in per day if we were able to get those cats. On top of that, when they sent trappers, or when they were going to send trappers, they never did. I got as many volunteers as I could through these wonderful people who were able to help me. I got as many cats as I could. A lot of those cats were returned back when I had said specifically I would pick them up and I would foster them myself or find foster. I work with a wonderful group out of Oakland as well. We have found homes for hundreds of cats. I personally have found homes for 75 cats myself through my connections and all the people that I know, these wonderful, generous people. This organization is a scam, a sham. It doesn't even hit. I have been in business for 40 years. I have told all of my 1,500 clients, I've sent out mass emails telling them to please stop funding this. It is a lie.
Is there any further public comment? All right, on that note, we will resume our discussion of action. Do commissioners, given the input from the community, does anyone have any ideas how we might proceed? Well, it occurs to me since SPCA president and the director of animal care and control were unable to attend our meeting tonight, perhaps the commission might like to send a letter urging the 2 organizations to revisit the policy and at the very least to maybe communicate how the policy will work, and that we can get that out to the community here, have a better understanding of what the intention is and what the intended outcomes are. If we do that, we could mention how many speakers we had tonight. We could take quotes from some of the speakers, for example. I think anything we can do to stress to the policymakers the importance and seemingly urgency of this issue might be advised at this point. Does anyone have any ideas on this? Jane?
I think that's unfortunately, like for everybody in the room, I think that's the best that we can do for you right now is to ask that they do continue this dialogue with you more openly, and let's see where that goes, and continue to hear from you as well too. How is that proceeding? And from Sherry from Virginia, you know, what steps? Maybe we can set some action items in there too, things that we think might be good in showing progress is being made to address a common rebuilding of trust and faith in that this policy is incorporating everybody's voice.
You know, additionally, normally this time of year we start to get the statistics from the partnership of ACC and SPCA, and generally it's around July or August when the data is released publicly, and then we usually have a presentation here in front of the commission. And that might be a good opportunity to delve into some of these numbers and try to get some clarity there, or ask, you know, what the plan is for creating more transparency around those numbers and outcomes. Yes.
And again, I'll research before our next meeting, but I do think that taking the opportunity to at least grab hold of all of this motivation that people have and hopefully point it in a productive direction in the future. I think that there might be some potential to get the city to basically give us some direction with a legislative change. In certain areas like Marin County, they don't allow outdoor cats or have a certain local ordinance against outdoor cats. Maybe that's not what we need, but something to give cats better protections than what the state does. Going back to the statement earlier about the 597 laws, those are generally not very applicable to cats that are considered feral. And until somebody actually takes on an animal and says it's theirs, you can't really get them for failing to provide food and water. And if instead We came up with some sort of legislation that within the city of San Francisco, cats are deemed not wildlife, but do get specific protections. Now maybe we can take all of these interested parties and put our efforts in a common direction.
Well, I'd like to say years ago this commission was, this was before my time, but in San Francisco, pet owners are not referred to as owners, they are referred to as guardians, and that was a city ordinance. And I believe that started with this commission, and it did, yeah.
It's actually started with me.
Yeah, well, there you go. So to all of those in the room, you know, just to reiterate what Commissioner Tobin has said is that while we don't have oversight necessarily and we do not create policy, we do find ways to get the spirit of this city and our love of us animals. We do find ways to get that into the ordinances of the city. And so maybe that's something to consider too, just changing, you know, we don't even know what a feral cat is. We could maybe address that. That might go a long way towards resolving these sort of issues. To that end, I would like to ask a commissioner to tackle a first draft of this. And for those in the audience, the way this works is when we craft a letter, because as I said, we only meet once a month, and we don't want to sit on this issue for so long. So we could come to an agreement amongst ourselves that we agree that we want to send a letter, and we could just agree sort of generally on the format and the wording, and then a commissioner would craft it, and then it would go out to whomever with our letterhead, and we wouldn't have to wait to the next meeting. So I ask you, do we agree that we should send a letter in expressing our concern over this issue to the SPCA and the ACC? Does everyone agree that that would be?
I move that we send a letter
Okay.
of recommendations based on the feedback from the group.
So that everyone in favor? Aye. All right. So we will do that. I think the wording. I think we all agree it's pretty straightforward. We're concerned about the decision-making process, the communication process, and
Collection of the data.
And the collection of the data and the metrics to determine success. I think those are our key points around this. And then perhaps we could, if we go through the records, you can tell us how many public speakers we had. We can point to the fact that this has been a very long meeting for us, well attended. Thank you all, and get some. Really express to the powers that be how important this issue is. Does that sound good? Okay, so all in favor of, we said we agree on a letter.
Oh, we already moved to do that. So, and we'll tackle those points. I'll work on the first draft of the letter. Is there anybody else who'd like to join me in my second glance over? Because okay, great.
Great. So if you two could get a draft together, and then the way it works is we're not able to collaborate outside of this forum, and so if you two could get a draft together and just agree on more, I guess you could include me or you could include one other, but that maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should just agree with yourselves, send it to me, and then I can disseminate it to the commission,
right.
And at that point it would be public, and so we can share it with our friends in the community here.
How do we see the letter?
Yes, as I said, we will craft the letter. Right. We can no longer discuss it outside of this forum. Right. So at that point, the letter will be sent and it'll be public. And so we will send it to the whomever we're going to send it to, but we can also send it to representatives. For example, I'm sure Maria, I have Maria's contact information. A lot of us here do, so we can get it that way. Right? Excellent. Is there any further public comment on this issue? Anything that hasn't been addressed? All right, so we will move on. Thank you all very much.